Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like that one?
All right, we're going to get the meeting started. Please stand for the pledge.
To the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to start with the public portion. Jim Walker.
Okay, Jim Walker from InterScience. I'm here tonight on behalf of Devon Yacht Club. We're here to resolve the sand next to the filled dock. Each year, the sand has been moved from the filled dock for the past 100 years or so. It's always been done. However, we're asking for a permit. And what we're going to do is move 10 or 20 cubic yards of sand from this area. It builds up on the updrift side of the filled dock, and it would be moved over here to the dredge spoil disposal area and stockpiled for the town trustees to use. This is the area where the dredge spoils go. Dredge material is dredged from the inlet to the boat basin, placed here. And this sand will simply be removed, put over here, stockpiled in the same place for use by the trustees.
Jim, this is basically the sand on the walkways, if I'm not mistaken, or is it a lot? I mean,
It's not a lot of material. Probably on a given year, it's 5 or 10 yards. But to be careful with the town trustees permit, we're asking for 10 or 20 cubic yards.
Yeah.
A 20 cubic yard truck is a fairly decent sized dump truck. That should more than cover it every year. And basically the sand starts to cover the dock. So they've always moved the sand off the top of the dock, alongside of the dock, and put it over on the other side.
Seems like a non-issue to me.
oh, yeah, yeah. It's maintenance, right?
Do you have?
Yeah.
It's maintenance and
We'd already gone through this. I'd like to put a motion that we approve this.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jim.
take it easy.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Scott DeBriner?
Scott, you want the easel?
Do you guys want to look at the, do you want to look at the plans to this? We've actually already been through this.
No, but if you need anything, I have the whole file.
Yeah, I got everything I need.
My name is Scott DeBriner. I'm with InterScience Research Associates as well. My official title is Senior Environmental Planner and Landscape Architect. I'm here on behalf of 199 Lily Pond Lane LLC. Beginning of the summer, we submitted an application for the reconstruction of a rock revetment. The day that we submitted the application, we got a phone call from Jim Grimes, who wanted to meet on the property to discuss the proposal. We met him later that afternoon with Eric Brown from Ackerman, Packman, O'Brien, and Brown. And Diane McNally and Jim, we met on the site. They did not have any concerns about the proposed reconstruction of the revetment. However, as the discussion progressed, they did ask how the property owner was going to get over the revetment to the beach. Right now, there is an elevated walkway, which will obviously have to be removed in order to reconstruct the revetment. We did not have plans for the reconstruction of the elevated walkway with our application. Now, we do have plans for that walkway. Those plans were submitted, I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago. They were discussed the walkway plans were discussed at your last meeting held in late November. I did not attend that meeting. Eric did. Apparently, there was a question from the trustees about the revegetation of the dune when we were all done with the project, and a request for the trustees made a request for a revegetation plan. In response to that request, last week what I did is I resubmitted a copy of the revetment plans, which actually show the proposed revegetation. The revegetation isn't on the walkway plans, because that's all it is a walkway plans. We're not showing the dune restoration with the walkway. We're showing the dune restoration with the revetment plans. So those plans actually do show beach grass planted 12 inches on center throughout the whole dune. So my request to you is that we really don't need to prepare a separate revegetation plan because it's actually already shown on the revetment plan. So I'm here tonight to answer any questions. We're hopeful that there will be a vote tonight.
Right. Guys, I didn't pick up, the last time when this came up at the last meeting, I was not looking at the original plans. The revegetation is spelled out clearly in that. In fact, it's reiterated through 4 sections in the plan. What we were missing as of the last meeting was a covenant basically guaranteeing that this revetment would be maintained, covered with sand and vegetated, which we've since received from Eric Brown. And if anybody has any questions, be glad to answer them, Ray.
Jim, have you looked at the survey pertaining to the placement of?
I have looked at the survey. Now, when you look at the plans, there is some appearance that this new revetment projects farther into the beach than is the existing. But if you actually look at the survey, what it was is the surveyor only recorded what was visible, okay? The existing revetment projects to exactly the same dimension as they've shown on their plans. This is a replacement in kind with the exact same thing, with the exact same material. In fact, when I say the exact same material, the stones that are there now will be removed, a setting bed will be prepared, the existing stones will be reset, any additional stones, it's spelled out in the plans, will be will be brought on site and replaced. At the end of this, the project will be covered with 18 inches of sand, will be planted with beach grass, 18 inches on center, and we have a separate plan for the replacement of the boardwalk, which is existing now. We're replacing that with non-treated materials. We have that. I think it's in order. The only question I had the last time, Scott, and I articulated it to Eric, was that last run of steps that meets the beach. You've got it down as, as I think mahogany and tropical hardwood. That should really be, that is spelled out as a breakaway. It's detailed as a breakaway walk. It's very heavy. You might save your client a little bit of money and maybe do something aluminum there that truly could be lifted comfortably and removed at the end of the season, or if a storm is imminent. Other than that, I would like to recommend, I'd like to put a motion to approve this.
Okay, I think, Andrew, you took a look at that covenant, didn't you?
Yeah, we got the covenant this afternoon.
Does it look okay?
Yeah, it looks fine. We'll need the Schedule A.
Yeah, no problem. Eric Brown, Ackerman Partners for the applicant. Just in reference to that, we used the covenant that you guys placed over the revetment at 85 West End Road. It's virtually the same covenant, obviously with the details changed to reflect this. They have it. I've ordered a Schedule A from Walbridge. I just don't have it yet. And assuming you guys are okay with it, we'll run it by you guys. And Jim, in answer to your, or with respect to your recommendation on the materials, I've forwarded to the client and basically said, look, what you're proposing now may be difficult to take, to move in and out. So, you might consider another material. And my understanding is it's working its way up vast and mighty chain that leads to
Okay.
someone
I
further
don't
up the
see-
food chain
I
for
don't
me.
see a reason to stop this permit because of that. I think you could build it the way it's detailed. It's just, you're going to need some real strong people to get that step off in the event of a storm, the way it's
So
drawn
you're
right
happy
now.
with it, then, right?
I'm happy
I'll
with it.
second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good holiday, guys.
You're welcome.
Okay, Richard Hammer?
Good evening, Richard A. Hammer, here representing Nigel Curtis. I think this was discussed by the trustees. I was unaware it was on your prior application agenda. So I'm here tonight. I was clarifying a couple of points, I think, pursuant to the request of the trustees. I did submit the deed history on this property that shows the original deed into, out of the trustees went to the bay. And it's been followed through to today. I've represented other clients on this particular stretch of beach, Gary Sirota, I think, who was back in front of you guys tonight, and had gotten non-jurisdiction letters issued by the board. We're proposing to do a geocube structure on this property, basically to try and stop the erosional issues that are happening there. At least we're not stopping anything at the end of the day. I think this property in this area of the town is going to call for a larger solution, maybe an erosion control district, et cetera. But we need to do something to kind of stop the stem of loss that's been, that's readily apparent if you visit the properties. They're imminently failed. But I think the trustees clearly deeded out ownership to the bay, and therefore this should be allowed to proceed as out of your jurisdiction at present.
You want to add anything?
No, I agree. The applicant's counsel sent me the copies of our records showing that we did indeed sell this property some time ago.
I know, that's what we were waiting for.
And then there was a subsequent deed included in here where these properties were subsequently redeeded to other members of the Edgeworths family. Copy of the current deed showing that the ownership goes down to the mean high water mark. One thing I do want to point out, I do think a letter of non-jurisdictions is appropriate here, but even if we did have jurisdiction here, this proposed application, A, has DEC approval, it has town ZBA approval, and as it's drawn, these geocubes are not going on the beach proper, they are actually going within the dune itself. So honestly, this was never in our jurisdiction. So I would like to make a motion that we have our counsel forward a letter to.
And I looked through those records, and I agree with Jim that
Yes.
the trustees did sell it down to the high water.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I'll have a second for Jim.
all right,
all right.
all in
Okay.
favor?
Thank you for
So
researching
we'll
that.
get you a
Andy.
letter
Okay,
of
no problem.
non-jurisdiction.
Thank you very much.
We'll get you on the next one.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, Eric Brown, again?
No, it was
Oh,
probably
he
the
left.
same, yeah.
Oh, that's the same one, okay. Great. Susan, did you want to speak? You're going to wait? Okay. Looks like we're, Dan Farnham? Nope, okay. Deepwater. Okay,
All right, let me-
yep.
Is there any, quick comments or anything?
Nobody with representation.
All right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Rick Drew from the East Hampton Town Trustees. Tonight, we have a great presentation on the Deepwater Wind Farm South Fork and the related opportunities and risks associated with the project. Our trustee board, via the Harbor Management Committee, which is co-chaired by Jim Grimes and myself, have held a series of meetings on the proposed Deepwater Wind Farm South Fork. Deepwater is a project that will entail building 15 windmills located to the north-northwest of Cox's Ledge on our ocean bottomland, and run a transmission cable approximately 30 miles to Beach Lane in Wainscott. The wind farm will deliver approximately up to 90 megawatts of electricity to the South Fork. The project has been in the planning stage for several years, and recently the town board and our trustee board has been asked to consider a proposal to support the project and land a transmission cable at Beach Lane. Our Harbor Management Committee meeting process has taken us on an informative and challenging journey to learn about the project and the related planning efforts of our public utility provider, PSEG LIPA. Deepwater provides an excellent opportunity to deliver clean energy to our community and reduce fossil fuel emissions, a necessary and powerful step towards combating climate change. The potential consequences of damaging our ocean seafloor and related fisheries resources during construction and operation is a potential and real risk that must be looked at very carefully. There are some things that we do know at this time, and there's a lot more to learn. Deepwater Wind South Fork will require more than 20 permits and approvals from various governmental and regulatory agencies. Deepwater Wind South Fork has a contract in place with PSEG LIPA to deliver up to 90 megawatts of electricity to the Buell Lane East Hampton Power Substation. Deepwater Wind has a lease in place with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to install up to 200 wind turbines in an area known as REMA, the Rhode Island, Massachusetts Wind Energy Area, a 256 square mile area north of Cox's Ledge. Offshore wind turbines require the construction and installation or anchoring of the turbine bases into the bottomland of the ocean seafloor. Deepwater Wind is proposing to do this in the Cox's Ledge area and important regional fishing grounds. In addition, a transmission cable will be jet plowed approximately 30 miles from the Cox's Ledge area to Beach Lane in the historic district of Wainscott. Our town roadways and the Long Island right-of-way would then be used to deliver the transmission cable to the Buell Lane substation. It's a complex project with both benefits and downsides. How do we best protect our underwater marine environment to the impacts of offshore construction and still realize the benefits of clean, sustainable wind energy? How do we plan an energy grid and transmission system that meets our 100% renewable energy goals and create local jobs and facilitate economic sustainability for our community? The time is upon our community to take the necessary steps to develop and implement clean energy in a responsible and thoughtful manner. This process offers both opportunity and risk for our beloved East Hampton. The trustees have taken a hard look at this, and I want to give everyone a little update on the timeline for what we've been doing. We've held meetings for approximately the past 8 months. Tonight, we will be hearing from the president of Deepwater Wind. It's the first time we'll be meeting him. This Thursday, we have a Harbor Management Committee meeting, and we'll be preparing recommendations to the trustee board. We will have an organizational meeting for the new year on January 8th. We will hold a Harbor Management Committee meeting again to continue preparing recommendations on January 11th, and a public hearing will be taking place later in January, possibly on January 20th, and the date will be announced as soon as possible. And sometime shortly thereafter that, the trustees will be taking a vote as a board on this matter. So I did want to give everyone a little background as to the timeline and what has taken place thus far. So we will proceed with the presentation, and then there will be a question and answer session for members of the public. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Chris Van Beek from Deepwater Wind.
Good evening, all. Thanks for coming and giving us the opportunity to present what we are doing to build these wind farms. Also, how we built Block Island. I think that's a good example on how we install wind farms. Yeah, it's better to rotate this a little bit.
Trustees still see?
We'll be all right.
You could move that podium over, maybe.
It's always tricky.
I never even knew it could do this. Pretty cool. How's that, better?
Yeah, it's great.
No.
Oh, now you're blocked by that.
All right, how can I click to
You want to be here?
the presentation? No, this is fine, I can see it.
Mouse. Should be a wireless mouse.
Good, thank you.
You might have to be on there. Okay.
So we were awarded a 20-year contract with LIPA to deliver 96 megawatts of offshore wind power to the LIPA substation in East Hampton. The location of the wind farm, I'll have the map later on, is about 30 nautical miles from Montauk, and it will power about 50,000 homes in the U.S. It's me. It's a nice combination. A little bit the timeline of the project. All the presentations we have done so far to the trustees and the community. It's one of the ways deepwater wind works. We want to work together with all the stakeholders of the projects. Block Island is an example of that. We were always a company who believed in starting with a demonstration project, and Block Island was an ideal demonstration project. 30 megawatts, 5 turbines, working with all stakeholders on what you can learn from building a wind farm, and from the lessons learned, how to improve for the next wind farm. So that's why I will lead you through the lessons learned from Block Island as well, construction-wise, but also the environmental aspects of the project. Sure. So the agenda for tonight is the process for the permitting, the lessons learned from Block Island, construction and science, results so far. It's pretty preliminary. We just finished the surveys, but we can show you what we have seen so far. But there is still a lot of processing of that data needed. And then we will also go into the proposed community benefit package, and my colleague Clint Plummer will go through that. And as explained, we will have enough time for questions, and hopefully we can provide all the answers. So the layout of the wind farm is like this. Here is the Cox Ledge area, and the South Fork Wind Farm is located in the southwest area of this location. The full wind farm can be built out with 200, 250 turbines. The South Fork project is about 11 turbines of 8, 9 megawatt each. And then we will have an export cable. The original plan was to go to the north side of the South Fork, but also talking with all stakeholders, I think the better idea is to go to the south side. It's a better landing location. You avoid fishing areas on the north, and that's how we came up with the Beach Lane location. Permitting is not so easy. So we have a full permitting department. The vice president of permitting is Aileen Kenny. She permitted the first wind farm in the United States, the Block Island wind farm. But if you see what kind of agencies are involved in the permitting, it's quite extensive. The major ones are BOEM. They are the federal agency owning the lease, giving us the lease, and they are the prime permitting agency for giving the permit for building the wind farm. But also the New York State Park is important for Article 7. So everything that's in state waters and on Long Island needs a permit from them. And we have NOAA, we have the Army Corps of Engineers, the town of East Hampton, the trustees. So we're working with all these parties to have an acceptable plan and get the permits and easements from all these parties. A little bit the schedule that we have. Till now we did a lot of outreach. In 2017 we had our approval finally for the wind farm. The controller approved the LIPA contract for this project. We are now working on detailed science and engineering on how to build a wind farm. It's pretty early because at the end you see that in 2022, that's the planned starting date for the completion of the wind farm. And first power will be delivered in Q4 of 2022. So that's 5 years from now. And at this moment for the permits, we already have to provide in quite some detail on how we are going to build this wind farm, which technologies do we use. So there's already a lot of engineering ongoing and associated science to be included in our permit application. So in the end, we want permit approval, and we want an approval that we can execute the project. So it's very important that we are correct in our execution methods, because if we don't exclude that in the right way in our permits, we are not allowed to execute the project. And, that's not a good thing. We are almost there that we can submit our permit application to BOEM and to state parks. That's planned for March 2018, so about 3 months from now. And then these agencies will probably take 2 years to approve the project. So we hope to have that in 2020, perhaps 21. And then we start construction of the wind farm. We're not allowed to do anything in the field or on land before we have the permits. We are allowed to, for instance, do engineering on the foundations, and we might even build foundations or adjust ports so that we can execute the project. So that's allowed before we have the permits. But real activity in the water and here in East Hampton is only allowed after we have the permits. So in 2021, we expect to do the first work. The plan is to install foundations in 21. And then in the next year, in 2022, the plan is to install the transmission system and to install the turbines, do the commissioning, and have the project operational in 2022. So a little bit, we especially on Block Island, and we started working after Sandy. So one of the questions that we always had is, how do you know the wind farm is reliable? Why don't they fall over? And if there is a hurricane, can they survive a hurricane? And the answer is yes, because a reliable wind farm starts with the right project-specific design criteria. And it's not a generic design criteria. We study the wind and the waves of the project-specific area, and we come up with the worst-case scenario, and we design the wind farm for those criteria. So, for instance, for Block Island, we have to design the wind farm, and South Fork will also be designed for these criteria for the 100-year return wind. And for instance, for Block Island, that was 97 miles per hour was the design criteria. And if you compare that to one of the worst hurricanes we had, Sandy, that had a maximum wind gust of 90 miles per hour, but at really the eye of the hurricane. So in New Jersey, where it arrived on land in Atlantic City. So the wind speed here or in Rhode Island was slightly less than that. We also designed it for the 100-year return wave height, which is a 50 feet wave that can hit the wind farm. Also, it's important that you do a fatigue analysis for your wind farm. So fatigue is one of the most important design criteria for your wind farm, because there is a turbine spinning for 25 years. Wind is putting the forces on it, and the forces are changing all the time. So the fatigue design for this wind farm, these wind farms, is very onerous. We had for Block Island 5,000 load cases to prove that the wind farm was suitable for a lifetime of 25 years. And it's not just us who are doing that. We have to hire a CVA, and the CVA stands for a Certified Verification Agent. In this case, we hired ABS, and they are an independent party who reports to the permitting agency, so not to us. So in this case for Block Island, it was to the CRMC, the Coastal Resource Management Council of Rhode Island. For South Fork, it will be to BOEM, that the CVA will report that we have the correct design criteria and we do the right design analysis for the wind farm. So if you do all this, I'm pretty sure that that wind farm will last for the design life for what you want for this wind farm, in this case 25 years. So once you have done that, you translate that into your structures, into the design. And then you start building the foundations. So as you know, in the sea, there's nothing between the seabed and the water level. So what you do is you put a lattice structure, in the case of Block Island, on the seabed till once you have installed it, you see that yellow piece, which is the top of this foundation, just sticking out 20 feet above the waterline. So that's suitable for a summer storm. Then in the case of Block Island, we installed foundation piles through the legs of the jacket. And you can see them sticking out like here. And then you put a hammer on top of each pile, and you drive the piles into the seabed. So for Block Island, the depth of these piles were 200 feet into the seabed. And then you make the connection of the pile to the jacket. This is also an environmental element because this creates noise. So we do a full noise analysis for marine mammals, that we know that the noise that is created by driving these piles into the seabed is acceptable and is not harassing the marine mammals. There is an area where the noise is too loud. It's above 120 decibel. So that's an area that there are not allowed any marine mammals when you do these piling operations. So we have marine mammal observers that ensure that when we do these pile driving operations, there are no marine mammals in that exclusion zone. So we did that for Block Island, and that worked out pretty well. We stopped a few days because we had marine mammals and whales in the area, but overall the delay due to marine mammals was not bad. And this system we are going to use for South Fork as well. So working with the NGOs, the right whale, that we do the right installation and won't harass any of these species is very important for us, and we develop methods on how to do that. After the pile driving, we install a topside. We call that a transition piece on top of the piles, and we weld that offshore. That's also a way that you can adjust the level, because the requirement on the level of that topside is very tight. If you are 1 degree out, you won't see it, but with the turbine sticking out 300 feet and 1 degree out of level, you would see that. So we have to have this topside within 0.2 of a degree, and by having this field joint and adjusting the level, you can achieve that. So in that way, you have a complete foundation, but then you have to connect the transmission system to each foundation. So for Block Island, we had this cable lay barge, the Big Max, and you see a power cable tank in the middle of the vessel, and then this power comes out of the tank over this structure, and in the end it goes out over the stern of the vessel. And then as explained and mentioned earlier, we have a jet plow plowing the cable into the seabed. During the surveys we have done, we see whether the seabed is suitable, and we select a route that we know that we can do this burial method into the seabed. It's one of the best methods to install this cable, because the disturbance by a jet plow is very limited. It more or less, by the jet streams, it liquefies the seabed just for a temporary few hours. It allows the cable to sink into the seabed to a depth that is the design depth. In the case of Block Island, it's 6 feet burial depth. But after that, the resettlement of that area is pretty fast. So it's a pretty good way of burying your cable. The 6 feet is, and that has not been determined for South Fork. We will do a burial assessment, and all the things that could happen to a cable, like fishing or dragging or trawling or an anchor dropping, is taken into account. So we know whatever happens on that seabed, that the cable is safe, but also that other activities can continue while the cable is there. So that's also important for fishing, that, and also for Block Island, there are no restrictions on fishing once that cable is buried into the seabed. Then we have to pull that cable in, and in the foundation you see J-tubes, we call them. They are here and here. So that's a specific protection, and with a steel wire already in it that connects to the power cable and pulls in the power cable to the top of the foundation, and there it's terminated in the terminator box. And then when the turbine is installed, you lower the power cables from the turbine and you connect that to that termination box, and in that way you can export the power of the turbine. There are also fiber optics in that cable, so that's the control system of your turbine. So the turbine is fully on internet and connected to a computer onshore, so you can control the wind farm and control, they call it the SCADA system of the turbine. So you get all the warnings, and you can operate the wind farm, you can control the power, you can do everything. So after that power cable is installed, we get the wind turbine installation. So there are 3 main components that are the towers that will rise the nacelle to the hub height and allows for the rotor to have enough clearance with the sea level. Then we have the generator itself, the nacelle, which is the heaviest part. That's about a 400-ton lift. If a pickup truck is about 2 tons, so this is 200 F-150s that you lift onto a tower. And then we do the blade installation. The blade is not so heavy, it's about 30 tons. So that's about 15 F-150s. And there are 3 of them to be installed. So that's a whole circus on how you install that, especially in the United States. Because the turbine is a delicate piece of equipment, and the turbine manufacturer does not allow that you swing with those loads. So you cannot lift it with a crane vessel that is moving. So you need a jack-up vessel that is large enough to install these turbines. And the jack-up vessels, they don't exist in the United States because the market is not there. They cannot build this for 5 or 12 turbines. We expect when this takes off that there will be US vessels and quite an opportunity for economic growth for the United States to have these vessels and have the people, US labor on these vessels. But there is also a Jones Act that you are not allowed to transport goods from a US harbor to another US harbor. And a wind farm, once there is a jacket, is considered a US harbor. So we are not allowed to transport components with that European jacket vessel. So that's why we hired Montco, which is a US company, and they had these jacket vessels, smaller ones, not suitable for installing the wind farm, but suitable for transporting components from the port of Providence to the wind farm. And this is the system we plan to use for South Fork as well, because in 2022, we still don't believe that there will be an American vessel suitable for this installation. I hope it will be, but I don't think so. Probably that's 24, 25 that will happen. It's a pretty spectacular installation. Yeah, I don't know whether everybody sees it, but you see a small thing, and that's a man sticking out to see whether the blade is coming in the right way. He's tied back, don't worry, so full protection, everything, because safety is key in these projects. But it's a spectacular installation. It all went well. In 19 days, we 19, we installed the 5 turbines, and it was a really good operation. So in the summer of 2016, the turbine installation was complete, and the commissioning, because it was all different pieces, and you have to tie all these pieces together. So that's the commissioning, and you also have to do a test run, so to prove that your turbine is fully operational, and then you are allowed to connect it to the grid. So that's the construction part. We also like to go a little bit into the science while we built this wind farm, and before we built that wind farm, and after we built the wind farm. So we did science on fish and fishery, lobster, the benthic habitat. We did a recreational boating survey, and we did surveys on birds and bats and marine mammals. So we have a full inventory of everything that's listed here. So the fishery survey we did 2 years before the start of the construction. We had 2 years that we were constructing the wind farm. So 1 year that we had foundation installation, and 1 year that we had turbine installation. And we also have 2 years of post-construction surveys. So we have a full statistics of those years to review what the effect is of that wind farm. That's another reason why we thought that the demonstration project was important, and work with the fishermen to see what the results are of this fishing survey. And I brought handouts. We have fact sheets of this fish survey, and we have fact sheets of the lobster survey. So you can all take a copy and read through the results. So far, it's a conclusion that the fish habitat is as good as it was, or perhaps a little bit better. Especially the fishing in the wind farm, because fishing is allowed in the wind farm, is spectacular. The marine growth on the steel structure is enormous, so that's a good habitat for all the fish that is there. So far this is working out very well. We did trawl surveys. We had an area in the wind farm, and we also had 2 reference because you know better than I do that fishing is better one season or 1 year than another year. So just to say it's better this year doesn't mean a lot. But if you have a reference area that you can compare it to the same year and there see how it improved, or...
Those wind farms, they're on Rhode Island state waters, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that eliminates anybody in this room from fishing in there with a trawler. I mean, I do have a Rhode Island license, but not a landing license, so I don't fish in there. That was flounder ground, but I got it.
So we fished every month. We did 2 trawls in each area, so 6 trawls, and we did that for 5.5 years now. We still have half a year to go till we completed this one. The lobster survey, more or less the same. We had areas in the field, and we had a reference blocks, so we could compare how the lobster catch was developing. We also did recreational boating survey, because recreational boating is also very important for Rhode Island. Perhaps less a little bit in Coxlodge, but around Block Island it was very important. So we did that from the southeast light and had the statistics on all the recreational boating. So we have all these statistics. And looking at the results before and after so far, you see that there is not a lot of difference, perhaps a little bit more activity around here. And certainly what we see in the wind farm itself, it's pretty attractive. Avian and bat surveys is pretty important, because you know there's always a claim that wind farms they kill birds and bats. So we did 3 years of surveys before we start to construct the turbines. We could show that there is not a lot of bird activity in that area. That's more due to the location, that the birds, well, they don't take off there because there's nowhere to go. You end up in England or in Ireland. And so they rather cross the area and take the flight to Boston. So our analysis clearly showed that there was not a lot of danger of killing birds. Still, we have to do 2 years of surveys afterwards. So we have quite some cameras on our wind farm to analyze whether there are bird hits. And so far, we don't think that's the case. it's honest to say that if it happens and your equipment is not working, it's hard to prove because something drops into the sea and you won't find it anymore. So it's very important that you have a good way of analyzing that. And then the marine mammal protection. We worked with almost every NGO on coming up with methods how we could construct that wind farm while not harassing marine mammals. We have our own voluntary time of year restriction where deep water wind agreed with the NGOs that we are not constructing in a certain period when you have whale migration. So mainly that's November, December till more or less April. There are other developers and we try to work with them, but they think they can construct the whole year. I worked personally 35 years on the ocean all over the world, and I don't think you should have a construction vessel out in December and January because the workability is pretty bad and dangerous. So it goes hand in hand to say we won't do construction work and construction work that creates noise in the wintertime. But that's a good way of ensuring that the whales are fine and the marine mammals are fine. We did our surveys this summer, but even during surveys where we have equipment and echo sounders and everything, we have marine mammal observers on board, and if there are marine mammals within a certain area, we stopped even the surveys. So that's a good way of ensuring that we will construct this wind farm without any effect to the environment. That's our goal. I told you that we bury that cable for 6 feet and that fishermen can continue fishing. But construction is always a little bit different than you think. So we managed to bury that cable for 95%. But there were a few areas that we did not achieve the burial depth. So for Block Island, we solved that with putting mattresses on top of that area where the cable was only buried for 2 or 3 feet, which was dangerous for anchors and fishing. So that's a little bit a debate with fishermen, because fishermen claim that these mattresses are not very friendly for their equipment. So that's the one area we still like to work with fishermen on how we solve that in the right way. I have here, it's not so good to see, but we dive on those mattresses and we monitor whether we see effects of fishing. And this is an example that the mattress is fine and we don't see a lot of indication, or we haven't found any snagged equipment on these mattresses. But this is still an area that we like to work together, come up with the right solution. And the first thing is that what we try to achieve is guarantee that we will achieve that burial depth over the full length of the cable. So the key lessons learned is stakeholder engagement. That's also the strategy of the company. We like to work with all stakeholders, listen to them, and if you hear what the concerns are, there are always quite some methods that you can take those concerns into account. So we will certainly try to do that. We do a lot of scientific monitoring, but it has to be specific to the conditions of the site, the habitat, resources, and the way the construction is executed. Monitoring must be carefully coordinated with construction activities. So I'm a construction guy, but I can tell you we're not so easy. We like to construct and don't want to be stopped by all kinds of science. But you know, I know it's necessary, but it needs good explanation between the construction crews and the scientific crews, that they work together on having the right science and continue with construction at the same time. Minimize effects with management tools. Example is the marine mammal observers. That's the way we manage to execute the work, while there might be marine mammals in the area. So in that way, we can stop the construction till the marine mammals are at a safe distance. Also, it's important to monitor the response of the habitat. We do quite some post-construction monitoring, also of that buried cable. You see the mattresses, so we have the full science on how the habitat recovers after construction. And if you do that, our conclusion is construction can be successful in a complex bottom environment with minimum disturbance to the habitat and resources.
Excuse me, Chris. So where is the body of work that substantiates that statement?
Sorry?
Where is the body of work that substantiates your last statement?
That last bottom one?
Yes, sir.
Well, we have a summary of all these things, and on the surface, for instance, of the jet plow area, where you can see that the seabed is recovered and it's back to normal. So we have that proof. I didn't bring that one, but we can make a summary on showing you that that is the case.
That would be, this board would absolutely have to see that information.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So based on that, we plan to do the same science for the South Fork wind farm. We're doing the archaeological science. Visual impact is very important. I would say less for Montauk, but for Block Island, the Vineyard, Block Island, that visual impact is important. So we do a full survey of that, and we have to show that the impact is acceptable. Wetlands, of course, sensitive habitat surveys, avian bed surveys will be done. Benthic surveys is important. We will do the fish and fishery surveys again, and we will work on the marine mammals and the sea turtle surveys. We will also do normal engineering, like an EMF study, the electric magnetic field study, so we know that your EMF is within acceptable limits. It's always a little bit, the public doesn't like EMF, but if you see the EMF from these cables and you compare that to your microwave at home, it's less than 1/10 of that EMF level. But we have to show that, and we are doing these studies. EFH studies, essential fish habitat studies, will be done to show that we are not affecting that. We are doing a navigational risk assessment, so that the marine traffic and navigation is not affected by this wind farm. That study is almost done. We have to do an air emission study. Sounds strange because there is no air emission once you have the wind farm, but the air emission during construction is there. And those vessels that you have seen, they have pretty big engines and consume quite some diesel. So we do a full analysis on that. Noise acoustic modeling will be done. Marine mammals risk assessment, and what we discussed as well as sediment transport modeling during the cable burial will be done. So all these analysis, science are in progress or will be done for the South Fork wind farm. So we will do geophysical and geotechnical surveys. You see a few examples of that. So we have a full picture of the seabed and take that into account for the siting of the wind farm. We are doing a benthic assessment, so we do pictures and also a cross-section of the areas of the cable and the wind farm. I have some more pictures of that later on. Here they are. So here you see the cable route and the wind farm, and some examples on where we have taken these pictures.
What is that terrain like? Is it pretty flat? Is it pretty wavy?
I have another picture,
Okay.
so I'll come back to that one. Here you see that the seabed, at least from these locations, is not special. There's also a camera, digging a hole, so you have a cross-section of that. This looks like pretty straightforward seabed, not special, and somewhere where you could build a wind farm. Another example, and the last one. We also take into account the well-known fishing spots that we try to avoid that. So that's part of the analysis we are doing. And then here to answer your question, this is a picture of the wind farm itself. And every red dot is a boulder of, let's say, 3-4 feet up to 20-30 feet. So one of the things we really see in this area is that there are quite some boulders, and it's almost cross-section coming from the northwest to the southeast, that you have areas where you can locate your wind farm. So without the boulders, the area is pretty nice, but one of the things we have to take into account are the boulders. It's a very bouldery area. So that's why I also think that trawling is not so much done in this area due to all the boulders on this, in this area. So the siting of the wind farm is also not so easy. The restrictions that we have to place the turbines just under a mile apart. We have also, we have to be able to connect that with a cable. So also the route for the cable must be possible. So to place 11, 12 turbines in this area, there are not a lot of options, but we will find a way, and we will also do some further surveys, because this is the seabed picture, but for us it probably means that there are boulders in the seabed as well. And if we do this piling operation, you don't want to hit a boulder which you're driving while you're driving a pile. Otherwise you get on refusal and you get a lot of problems. There are surveys that you can do to look deeper in the seabed, and that's planned for the coming year to do the final siting of the wind farm. Another area that is critical is the cable landing detail. I think there have been presentations on this, but we have to be sure that that cable will never be exposed, and the burial depth that we promise will be maintained. So that's why we have this profile, and we work together with Arim on getting the right information there. So there is a hard layer that will more or less stay in place. So that's why we want to have at least 10 feet of burial in that area, and then transition to a spot where we have the exit of our HDD. So that's still engineering, but we want to be sure that we have enough coverage for that cable, and it will never be exposed. And even in the worst condition, when you have all the erosion after a sandy event, that you still have enough burial depth for that cable. So we have all this data for 80 years, and we use that for the design of the HDD for that cable to meet the criteria I just mentioned. So after all this, we keep continuing doing this. So it's good to be here. It's great you are interested, and I welcome your questions. So stakeholder engagement will continue. We will process all the geophysical data, all the data we get from the habitats, fishery, archaeological data. So we are now processing that and translating that into our final layout of the wind farm and our permit application and the mitigation measures we will include in building our wind farm. We finalized the landing site and the design of the HCD, and all that will result in a permit application in March 2018. And then we move to the onshore part, and I think Clint, you'll take this part.
Yeah, happy to.
And
I just had a question before you go.
well, I will be back afterwards, but I'm happy to answer your question.
Okay, well, it's about the wind speed that these are designed to withstand. You said 97 miles per hour. That's basically a Category 1 hurricane. 1938, we had the Great Hurricane that had maximum sustained winds of up to 121 miles per hour and 109 without being influenced by the land contours. So, and we are looking at even 25 years out at a period where we can expect more intense storms. So I'm just wondering why you say that 97 was a worst case scenario, and what are you doing in terms of taking into account increased intensity of storms as we go further into the century?
Yeah, I have to check. So when Mr. Plummer gives this part, I will check a little bit on the numbers, and let me answer the question when I'll get back.
Great, thanks.
Clint?
Thank you. And let me just say thanks to the trustees, to Jim and Rick for coordinating this, and to everyone for coming out tonight. So just kind of recapping the process, as Chris mentioned, the project was originally awarded a contract with LIPA back in January of this past year after a long competition in which LIPA solicited proposals for new sources of power generation in East Hampton because something has to get built. So LIPA had proposed either building a new power plant or running new transmission lines or collecting other forms of new power generation. We competed against 21 other proposals, and after a 1.5 year long process, LIPA determined that this project was the most cost-effective new source of power generation to serve East Hampton. Anything else that would have been built to serve that need would have costed more. So building new transmission lines would not only be uglier, but it would have costed more, and building new fossil-fired generation would have cost more. So the project was designed to provide cost-effective, clean energy. We've now spent the last 8 months gathering data, as Chris described, and engaging with the community on determining what the right way to proceed with developing this project is. This is exactly the same approach we took with our Block Island project. We get a lot of questions about some of the technical details of building a project like this, and as you see, we're early in the development process. What typically happens is a developer will submit their permit applications with a pre-formed plan and then come to the community and try to sell them on it. We've taken a different approach, which is to initially get out and listen and understand what's important. I came here back in April of this year, less than a month after our contract was approved, and started talking with the community about this project. We initially identified 2 potential landfall locations on the North Shore. We got a lot of feedback from folks in this room and other folks around the community about that. And in response to that, we changed our approach and we listened to the community and we started looking at alternative landfall locations and alternative overland routes. We went through a long process of collecting a lot of data, and through that process, we identified 5 potential landfall locations. We then winnowed those down and approached what we believe is the best potential landfall location for this cable, which is the end of Beach Lane, running the cable up Beach Lane, making a short jog on Wainscott Main Street, up Sayers Path briefly, and then up Wainscott Stone Road through hedges, ultimately to the Long Island Railroad right-of-way and into that substation. The benefit of this approach is that, number one, it's got some of the best geology to be able to bury a cable under the beach in such a way that it will not become exposed. We've got our team here from First Coastal, and we can talk specifics of geology if folk have question about that. One of the other benefits of this is that we're able to minimize disturbance on roads, particularly on high-traffic roads. We will not be doing construction on 27, but rather we'll be tunneling underneath 27. And a significant portion of this route will be along the Long Island Railroad right-of-way, which means we're not disturbing roads in that stretch. We believe it's the best approach for those reasons. Now, our next step is to go forward with the permit applications for the project. For us to meet our in-service date of the end of 2022, we need to submit our permit applications by the end of the first quarter of 2018 because there's a long process, about 2 years, of review and public comment on those permit applications. That's the point at which, as Rick mentioned earlier, 20-plus different agencies will do their review and will solicit public comment on everything that we've proposed. So if there's an issue that we haven't considered, we'll either have to address it or we won't get the rights to proceed. But before we can even start that process and submit our permit applications to those federal and state agencies, we need to demonstrate that we have consulted with the local community and that we have the real estate rights, not the permits, not the authorization to proceed to construction, but rather simply the rights that if we get those permits at some point in the future, that we would then be able to use those publicly owned pieces of real estate to be able to develop our project. This project has basically 2 separate sets of locally owned real estate. One is the beach itself. As Chris explained, and as we're happy to go into more detail about, we won't be doing any construction work on the beach. We will, however, be using very common boring technology to drill under the beach, very deep, and again, happy to talk about that. The second set of real estate that we'll need is the publicly owned roads that run from Beach Lane all the way to the Long Island right-of-way, the Long Island Railroad right-of-way. It's this route here. Our proposal to the town is one that's based on a comprehensive set of consultations we've had with the community and with other stakeholders around East Hampton. Our ask is that in exchange for us providing a community benefits package, that we would get those real estate rights so that we can proceed with developing and permitting the project. We've thought a lot about this, and we spent several months consulting with the community about what's important and listening to what matters. And we continue to hear a number of things. One is that people want to understand that this project is going to be good for the local economy. And so we've taken that into consideration. Another is that this has got to be an improvement for Wainscott itself, where the cable comes ashore. Another is that we have to take into consideration the marine habitat, the fishing community. Another is that we have to take into consideration East Hampton's position as a leader in sustainability and resiliency. And then finally, there's just been a kind of constant degree of feedback about how people have appreciated us being here and want to make sure that there's transparency and accountability in the development of the project. So we've put forward a proposal for a community benefits package that would accompany the easements that would respond to each one of those. From the perspective of economic development, we would propose to develop our permanent operations and maintenance facility for the project right here in East Hampton, based in Montauk. That would be the location from which jobs associated with the ongoing operations and service work for the project would be based. That would be the first set of permanent jobs associated with offshore wind in the state of New York. That's a big deal. In the connection with our Block Island project, we employ about a half a dozen people. This project is several times larger than that, and this positions Montauk as a location from which not only the first offshore wind farm serving New York will be able to be a hub, but potential others as well. Second, we've understood how important it is that we approach Wainscott in a way that is not just leaving the place better than we found it, but really addressing some long-term problems in the area. So our approach has been threefold. First, obviously, we're going to restore any areas that we disturb. All of our construction work will take place in existing rights-of-way. It'll all take place during the period after Labor Day, but before Memorial Day. In addition to that, we also understand that this is a very special community, and it's one that we want to help improve. So we are committing that we would bury the existing overhead power lines along all of Beach Lane and along the stretch of Wainscott Main Street that runs from Sayers Path to Wainscott Northwest Road. We've prepared some visual simulations on that, happy to show those. But this is an area that's got some of the most spectacular views in all of East Hampton. It's that very pictorial view over Wainscott Pond, and it's an area that's been identified as a statewide area of scenic significance. Third, we understand that there are some water quality infrastructure issues. We are committing to fund up to $1 million to the town for water quality infrastructure improvements in Wainscott. That's Wainscott. Now, in addition to that, we've also had a long ongoing dialogue with the trustees about the marine habitat, marine environment, and about our overall engagement in the community. We're committing to 3 things that will be part of our ongoing commitment to this community. Number 1 is we're committing that over the full life of the project, development, construction, 25 years of operations, that we will maintain a fisheries liaison, someone that the fishing community can interact with on a day-to-day basis to get real-time information about anything that's going on with the wind farm so that we are an active, present part of that community and that we can be responsive to any issues that may arise. Currently, Julia Prince serves in that capacity for us. We're committing that over the full life of the project, we will have an individual available to talk to about this. Second, we're proposing to fund a series of funds that the trustees would administer in support of this community. The first would be a fisheries habitat fund for which we would provide $100,000. In addition to that, we would also fund another $500,000 to a marine environmental improvement fund that would also be administered by the trustees. In addition to that, there's also been a lot of pride in the community about East Hampton being a leader in energy sustainability and resiliency. We want to see that continue. We're committing to fund $200,000 to a new East Hampton Energy Sustainability and Resiliency Fund that would be invested by the town to promote those causes. And finally, as part of our ongoing commitment to ensure that there's transparency and accountability in the project, we're committing to a 3-part reporting process before both the town and the trustees. If this package is approved, we would commit that during the period before the start of construction, we would be submitting biannual reports and coming in and making presentations as the trustees request during that period. When we start offshore construction, we will be submitting monthly reports and giving monthly presentations. And when we were doing onshore construction work, we'll be doing weekly reports and weekly presentations so that the community, the trustees, the town are all fully up to speed on this construction progress. In terms of the actual easements themselves, these would be the rights for us to do construction activity within the town-owned roads. There would be a separate set of easements under the beach. The town-owned road easements would allow us to bury cable during that off-peak season of the year, starting after Labor Day, but before Memorial Day, and would require us to bury that cable within a concrete encased duck bank. We would have to consult with the town highway department, town engineer, town police department on a traffic management plan, on the technical specifications of how that cable would be installed and when it would be installed. We would also commit to fully restore any roads in which we were doing that construction activity. Specifically, we would do the initial construction work, put a temporary patch on the road, and come back in the immediately following off-peak season and fully repave the roads on which we were doing that construction work. In addition to that, we would also be funding the town a fair appraised value for those easements, in addition to the community benefits package. The means of this construction is pretty straightforward. It's the same approach that burying a water pipe or a sewer main takes. There's a temporary cut in the asphalt, excavation using backhoes and other earth-moving equipment, temporary patch put down in front of any driveways, the installation of conduit, the installation of a concrete backfill, and ultimately the installation of temporary pavement on top of that in order to create a usable road during that period. This advances at a rate of between about 300 feet a day to up to 1,000 feet a day, just depending on what other infrastructure is in the road and the composition of the soil. Within the beaches themselves, we would be doing a horizontal directional drilled installation. This is a very common method for the installation of utilities and other infrastructure under roads, under bodies of water, and under beaches. We successfully did multiple HDDs on our Block Island wind farm, and members of the town have gone to see that installation on Block Island. On Block Island, it's under the single most popular beach on all of Block Island, and as you walk out and see it today, the only evidence that is there is a manhole in the parking lot. We're committing that there be no construction activity on the beach face itself. All the activity would take place in the road about 250 feet back from the crest of the dunes. We would drill down at least 10 feet beneath the headland soils, the hard bottom under the beach itself. On top of that hard bottom, there's a level of sand that goes up and down. Assuming there's about 10 feet of sand on top of those headland soil, the cable would be 20 feet down because we are committing to be at least 10 feet beneath those headland soils. Folks from First Coastal are here. Happy to get into the geology if folks have specific questions about that. But I just want to wrap this up so we can get into the Q&A. This installation would be conducted using a horizontal directional drill. That drill would not start any work before November, and it would be done before March 31st. During the period of November and December, we would propose 12-hour operations. During the period of January, February, and March, we propose the ability to go to 24-hour operations, subject to our ability to meet town noise and light restrictions by constructing a temporary wall around the construction site itself. And in the event that there was one written complaint, the town could force us back to 12-hour-a-day operations. And in the same way that we're proposing to provide a assessment-based payment for the town road easements, we do the same type of assessment-based payment for burying the cable under the beach. And this is the same approach that we used with the town of New Shoreham, Rhode Island, which is Block Island, and then separately with Rhode Island State Parks, where we brought the cable ashore on the Rhode Island mainland. So it's a proven methodology that's been implemented successfully many times, and also by our company. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much. I know we've had a long presentation. I want to thank the trustees again for coordinating this. I'm sure there are plenty of questions, so I'll MC this for a while. But again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. All right, David.
Yes. In my own experience practicing real estate law for several decades, someone who gets the benefit of public use such as this often pays the municipality a percentage of the revenues during the period. So, for example, are you willing to pay the town, say, 8 to 10% gross revenues during the 25-year period?
We're absolutely committed to paying the town a fair assessment-based fee based on an independent assessment of what that real estate is worth.
I heard you say that earlier.
Yeah.
My question is, are you willing to pay the town a fixed percentage of gross revenue during the 25-year period when this would be in operation?
Yeah, so if that's what an assessor says, the way that we've approached this is that, and this is very common, and I'm not an attorney, so if you are, you probably know a lot more about real estate law than me, but in these types of easements that we've done before, and those that we're familiar with, an assessment-based methodology is common and proven in these types of transactions.
One doesn't need to be a lawyer to understand the concept, for example, of rent.
Yes.
Someone uses someone else's property, they typically pay rent. Are you, since your company would be using East Hampton town property, are you willing, in effect, to pay rent for the 25-year period?
Short answer is yes. We're very happy to make a payment or to make a ongoing assessed value based on the value of the real estate. And that's got to be independent. We can't influence it. There should be an independent assessor that identifies what that's worth, what a fair market value for that is, and we will pay that fair market value for that real estate.
During the 25-year period?
We are happy to do it either as an ongoing payment every year for 25 years or make a single lump sum upfront payment based on whatever the fair approach is. But if the town and the trustees have a preference for it to be an ongoing payment every year for 25 years, then yes, we will commit to that. I see you, Rick had his hand up first. Do you want to go?
Let the audience go first, please.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Hank Lackner. I'm a commercial fisherman here in Montauk.
Yeah.
And I am an American citizen, fishing American waters. I'm a New York State resident. And I've got some questions for you. I guess
Sure.
the first one I'd like to ask is, as he mentions interruption, use of his town lands and everything else, you're actually going into our fishing grounds. Now, as fishermen and your presentation to stakeholders' interests, I saw nothing there as far as, I'll call it a bribe, I'll call it whatever you want. 'Cause to me, you're giving one entity $600,000, a town $1 million, water rights, this, those are bribes. Okay, when you really get down to the definition of it, they're called bribes, so you can bring your wind power in. What are you gonna do, and this is the first of many questions, what are you gonna do for the fishermen? There was nothing in there that you're gonna say, when you tell me you need a 1-mile CPA and I have to interrupt my fishing activities, what are you gonna do for the fishermen? When I can't fish where I have historically fished for decades, way more than decades, when I have fished in these areas and I have to change my business operations, what are you gonna do for the fishermen? It's gonna be a very difficult thing for me to document, but those interruptions have happened, they will continue to happen. What are you gonna do for us, the poor little guy trying to scrape a living out of New York State's measly quotas in federal waters? And I am a federally permitted vessel, which I noticed your windows are from state waters to federal waters, because it's an easier permitting process. What do you plan on doing for us?
So, a couple of thoughts. First of all, we have to get at least 20 different federal, state, and local approvals for any one of our projects. So it's a long process. I would by no stretch call it easy.
I asked you, what are you gonna do
Yeah.
to bribe the fishermen? That's the question I asked you.
Hey, Hank, could you come up to the podium? If you want to be on the record, you should come up to the podium.
I'd love to be on.
Thank you. Just try to articulate it so everyone at home can hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hank Lackman, commercial fisherman from Montauk, New York. I'd just like to get it on record as to what are your intentions to subsidize the fishermen of the town of Montauk, East Hampton, as you move forward with your plan. You plan on giving certain entities money to restore habitat, to go ahead and use their beach, to use their town, their roads. What do you plan when you cut my road off to subsidize me? When your vessel that's burying the cable needs a CPA and I have to alter my fishing plan, what do you plan on doing to help subsidize the fishermen?
Yeah, could you please step back to the podium, Clint?
Sure. I'm not going to try to turn my back to you, but...
No worries.
So...
I got you back.
So a couple of things. First of all, our goal is not to be putting anybody out of being able to fish. The construction methodology that we're proposing, we believe that we will be able to operate continuously alongside the fishing community without displacement. If there are displacements, that will come out during the permitting process. If there are displacements there, if the construction methodology that we propose is found to have those, we will deal with that on a business-to-business basis with individual members of the fishing community in the same way that we did with our Block Island wind farm. The reason that we haven't put forward anything here is because we believe the construction methodology that we're going to use will be one that will allow the commercial fishing community to continue to operate as it is today along the entire project area. If it's not, then we'll deal with that on a one-on-one basis with members of the fishing community.
I appreciate your answer, but you've done a wonderful job of skirting my question. This is not a one-on-one question, okay? This is about an industry, okay? That you will, at some point, interrupt what we do and have done forever, and it's a tradition here in this community. You will interrupt it, and you have not addressed it anywhere in your entire presentation, okay? Nowhere did you mention fishermen. You mentioned the town, you mentioned the highway, you mentioned the beach, okay? You say you're not going to interrupt what we do. How do you know what I do? Let me get that's a perfect question. How do you know what I do? You mentioned the Fisheries Liaison, okay?
Stand up.
Who is your Fisheries Liaison? What experience does he have where you're putting those windmills in federal waters, especially as a trawler, okay? Who is he? Who's your Fisheries Liaison? Julia Prince is the furthest thing from a fishery liaison. Julia Prince is a politician who saw a chance to grab money, okay? That's what Julia Prince is, and that's what our fishery liaison is going to be. He's basically a traitor, okay? That's what that guy's going to be, because he's selling somebody out that he knows nothing about what he's going to talk about. And if he's in this room today, put him up here, and I want to question him, okay? Let me see what he knows about windmills, or does he just know where his paycheck's coming from? And then I have another question.
There's one in here.
Julia Prince is our fisheries liaison.
Okay.
There's not another one in this room?
Okay, you do not have another fisheries liaison. That's coming from the industry.
You don't have one in this room?
We have a fisheries liaison. We have a fisheries representative.
Can he stand?
Okay, let's speak with our fisheries representative. I'm sorry if I don't have your terminology down correctly.
Yeah.
Let's speak with him. Let's have him come up here and verify some of your presentation and tell us how it's not going to affect my livelihood.
So we came before this board several months ago and we said that we were going to be engaging a number of individuals. We hired Julia Prince, we hired Jennifer Garvey, and through that...
None of them with fishing experience. Let's clarify that. All they have is political experience.
Excuse me.
But continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let him finish, and then we'll have time for a rebuttal, maybe.
Yeah, one more question, Hank.
And I will have one more question, and it will pertain to the presentation, more so than some of the problems I have with the way they're representing themselves.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, so Julia Prince is our fisheries liaison. We also are reaching out to members of the fishing community to engage a fisheries representative who would be a member of that community, who would work on behalf of that community, who would be engaged with us to facilitate two-way communication. We have, in the past, used this approach successfully in other communities. In the case of Rhode Island and the Block Island wind farm, a gentleman named Rodman Sykes has been our fisheries representative for many years. We've done trawl surveys in the Block Island wind farm area. Captain Sykes has been the one that's conducted those surveys. He works on behalf of the community. And this is an individual and a role that is being engaged as a means of facilitating communication between us and the commercial fishing community. So we are in the process of bringing on board commercial fisheries representatives, in addition to our Fisheries Liaison. We haven't brought on anyone yet. We're in the process of bringing on a member of the commercial fishing community. That person has not yet been onboarded with Deepwater.
Hank, one more question, then we got to switch it up.
When that person
Question for Hank, then Chuck, you can
is
go.
onboarded, we will then come back, introduce that person in the same way that we've come back over the last 8 months, and been transparent about the way we do business.
Well, I guess timing is everything on that. So this person, and let me just get it on the record, has not signed a contract with Deepwater and does not work for you, our fisherman's representative, as of this day, right now.
Said he did.
All right, I'm asking you a question. It's yes or no is the answer, and then I'll ask my question.
We have not onboarded anyone in that.
I asked, did he sign a contract?
We have not
That is the
onboarded.
I asked, did he sign a contract? Do you not hear me? Everyone here hears me.
Hank, Hank.
I'm sorry, I just get, this is the answers we get from
Please,
Deepwater.
what he said was they have not signed anybody on.
That's
yet.
not what he said. He would not say those words on record, my friend. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. He
Right.
would not say those words because the fellow has signed a contract, unbeknownst to you, and it's signed yesterday, okay? I'm just telling you what I'm pretty sure I know. And this is part of the deception that Deepwater puts to us. Now, next question I have for you, and it's not really for you, it's for the other fellow who did the presentation. You told me that benthic growth is abundant on the windmills and everything else. Why was it not part of your presentation to show us a picture of that? But you were cordial enough to show me concrete blocks on the bottom of the ocean that presented no marine growth whatsoever. Okay? Your windmills are rusting, by the way, off Block Island. I pass them all the time. I can show you a picture on my phone if you want. But that being said, why is there no benthic growth on a concrete block that I could not tow my net over? I couldn't tow my 18-inch rock hoppers over it if I wanted to. But why is there no growth there, and why did you not present pictures if you want us to believe? The easiest way for me to believe is with your pictures, even though they are taken by someone who you hire and someone with no latitude and longitude coordinates on it. They could be anywhere in the world. But you want us to believe. You want us to believe because our governor said we should have wind power. I appreciate everything you've done.
Just a quick question, just a quick response. In our last presentation before the trustees, we showed extensive photos about the marine growth. We have those photos. Be happy to put those into the record. And Chris, you may have some additional comments.
I have the comment that for the record, this is a mattress from the wind farm. But if you want to take a picture and show it the next time and show what you see, I'm most willing to look at those pictures.
I don't have $1 billion corporation to swim down on the bottom and take pictures, sir. You should have presented them if you want us to be a believer.
Well, I presented it, but you don't believe it.
No, that's not Block Island wind farm. You showed me concrete with no growth on it. So I guess I should believe it. There is no growth. You're not promoting the environment.
I have a question for Clint. Clint?
Bring the picture back in the concrete so the audience can retake it, because the concrete don't look in the
Let me establish some ground rules here, please. Okay? This gentleman has an opportunity to speak. Hank, you had your opportunity. There's going to be a lot more people. There'll be no audience yelling. I'm sorry, you just can't be.
I appreciate it. After a 2-hour song, what they call horse and pony show, the truth should be.
Okay. Yeah. And you know what? I'm all for everybody having an opportunity to speak. So thank you. Let's be civil.
Just for reference, these are actually the foundations at Block Island. That's the marine growth on the bottom of the foundation after them being in the water for about 2 years.
Latitude and longitude gives it a lot more justification.
Yeah, we have the specifications of that. We will put those into the record. Those are, you can drive out to the wind turbines, but these are actual photographs of the seafloor at the wind farm.
Okay. Sir, would you like to come up? And just please, if you could, announce your name and...
I'm Chuck Marisi, Montauk Commercial Fisherman, owner and operator of the Fishing Vessel Act 1. I was told somebody
took the job here today, another fisherman. And if he's gonna be, you know, representing us for the wind farm, I think the fishermen should pick that person, not your company, okay? Somebody that, you know, is gonna stick up for us. We don't know if this guy's just in it for the buck or whatever. And I appreciate you trustees, and I'm not gonna hoot and holler, and Jimmy, I had a discussion with him. And, you know, I voted for some of you guys. And, you know, well, hey, hopefully you do the right thing. I know you're not up here trying to screw us all. But I'm gonna tell you, with the wind farms, personally, I think it's kind of a good idea. Okay? I don't have a problem with them. I'm out in the ocean. You know why fishermen are against them? I'm gonna tell you why. Because the governor, NOAA, and every agency that you're dealing with has been putting us out of business for 20 years. Okay? And today there's not more fishermen here because today is the biggest 11-day fish derby for fluke, 500 pounds. We used to be allowed 1,500 a day. Like, we got 11 days to catch 500 pounds. Okay? And these guys need it. Down to 50 pounds of fish. You know, the fish are out there. They're doing the studies. They got no problem for the windmills. We feel like we're under attack. You know, like I told Jimmy, I said, oh, we don't go to every meeting. You go to about 20 meetings and you get nowhere. I'm not talking trustees meetings. I'm talking NOAA fisheries and everything else. We're the most regulated industry besides nuclear power. Seriously. You don't know what we go through every day. You know, you stay up awake. You know, it's just crazy. It's we've never got a fair shake, and of course we're going to be scared of you, and him too. You know, just the voice. You know, I feel like James. Let me get you. But I do see some growth there. There's some cunners on there. But you know, I used to be allowed 3,000 pounds of codfish a day. Okay, now I'm allowed nothing. As soon as the windmills started, it went to 300 pounds to 25 pounds. If I got a 30-pound cod, I was gonna get arrested. I had to stop ground fishing because my neck got stiff on the way in because I had to throw 400 pounds of cod over. Okay? We have not got a fair shake. We want a fair shake. Wind power's great, man. Bring it on. But give us something to live on too. You know, we got to make a living too. And we've been stepped on. I was going to bring a lobster here today and smash it and watch all the old ladies go, oh! You know, because it's going to be lobsters crushed. But you know, we've been tortured. That's what I'm saying. Hey, Chuck, you can stand up and introduce yourself. All right.
Thank you. Just one second. Excuse me, Clint. Yeah. I did want to ask a question about a little more detailed dive into the environmental and fisheries area. We had mentioned Mr. Carey possibly being able to come back and do a deeper dive in that area. Can you give us some information on him coming back to speak to us before too long?
A deeper dive, no pun intended. Several months ago, we gave a presentation in which we had my colleague, our Vice President of Permitting and Environmental Affairs, Aileen Kenny, and Drew Carey, who runs an environmental consulting firm called Inspire Environmental, who prepared many of the slides in the deck that you saw tonight. Drew is recognized as an international expert in these fields and gave a very good presentation. Mr. Carey will be coming back in January. We're working to finalize a date, but I can commit that he will be here and Aileen will be here in the month of January at a time that is convenient for the trustees and for the public to attend, to both present on the updated science for both Block Island and the South Fork Wind Farm, and to take any questions about activities at the Block Island Wind Farm and the planned activities for the South Fork Wind Farm.
Thank you, Clint.
You're welcome.
Simon, would you like to speak?
Simon Kinsella, a member of the Wainscott community. As you can probably tell, I'm not a fisherman. But I do empathise with the fishermen because in Wainscott we feel a bit the same. There hasn't been much information coming forward from deep water wind. Clint, you've promised us many times proposals, but they haven't been forthcoming. You've promised proposals to the town, but they haven't been forthcoming. We were promised a proposal tonight, but I haven't seen any proposal. And I don't want to get it bogged down in all the details, but I just want to leave you with one point, and that is, whilst we're here, the town trustees have a unique position, and the town of East Hampton, I can see Sylvia there, has a unique position in that deep water wind cannot progress or submit its application for permits prior to having the easements. So I think that I'd like to submit to the trustees that the easements should not be granted, and to the town, no easements should be granted unless there is full disclosure of information, which includes the fisheries surveys. It includes all the environmental surveys that need to be done in Wainscott and Georgica Pond. And just today, Chris Gobler sent me an email saying that there are a family of, I'm not quite sure whether they were threatened or endangered, of salamanders in Wainscott Pond. And we hear the news of all the wildlife all the time. It's a very sensitive area, and we can't go ahead and grant the easements and go through the permitting process without all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. Once the easements have been approved, everything is out of our hands. It goes to a state level. So I think it's important that the trustees hold their ground and not grant the easements until they're satisfied that all the information is in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, sir, would you like to come up?
May I respond?
Oh, sure, please.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, I thought I did put the proposal out because what we just went through with the community benefits package was that we've submitted a formal copy of that to both the town and the trustees, which I believe is public. And if it's not, we will make the written document itself public, which is our public presentation of everything in writing that I just said tonight. So if that wasn't clear, then I apologize, but we have submitted a written proposal that is public. So that's out there. As it relates to our commitment about environmental studies, yeah, absolutely. We will commit that all the environmental studies will be public and that they will be public before we receive any of our permits. We're in a catch-22, however, because I can't tell you today what all the environmental studies we're going to need will be until we go through a full scoping process with all the agencies that are going to be involved. And I can't start that scoping process until I submit my applications. So that puts me in a position where I either need to get town-owned rights-of-way to be able to demonstrate that I have those, or go to a state-owned right-of-way. That was our original proposal that nobody in the town liked. That was to use state-owned landfalls like Napeague State Park. So our focus here has been on trying to create a process in which we took information from the community and adapted our proposal to that, and then start a long process in which we do this formal scoping, which is a public process, and then we make all those data public. So if you have something to respond, so please.
Very quickly. Firstly, they have to be in before you're granted the easements, not in after the easements have been granted, because then the town trustees and the town has no influence. So everyone at a local level has to have the benefit, the opportunity to assess what you're doing correctly. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room is for wind power. Is anyone against wind power here? Okay, so really what we're talking about is the details. But it's difficult to talk about the details when we don't know what they are. And the other, have you got a copy of that proposal? Because I haven't seen it.
Okay, I don't think I've got a hard copy. We've submitted hard copies, but we can email that and make it available.
Sylvia, did you get a copy of that proposal? Well, hand to the town board.
Yeah. Here's a copy. It's in my folder for tonight.
It's $50 cash. Pay me.
I can tell you where to send the bill.
All right.
Should be on the town website, too.
Question? Anybody? Yeah, this gentleman.
Sir, you were first.
Good evening. My name is Michael Jordan. I live in Amagansett. I have a lot of questions, but I only have one question I'll ask at this time in the interest of time since it's running late. The facility has a useful life of 25 years, and assuming that is what it is, what happens to the facility after 25 years? Does it get demolished? And if so, if that's what happens if Deepwater Wind prior to that time were to go bankrupt? And who would then be responsible for demolition and removal of the facilities?
Chris?
Good question, thank you. So part of the design is that we already take the decommissioning of the wind farm into account. So the standard is, and that's included in the permit, that the full wind farm will be removed from the waters and will be taken ashore and recycled for most of the products. But the full wind farm will be removed from the seabed. What we also have to do is, because you might have the problem that Deepwater Wind might end up in troubles, and I don't think that's the case, but we have to take care of that. So there will be a decommissioning fund that we have to fund the moment we start working on the wind farm. So it is ensured that there is always money that is available to do the decommissioning, even if Deepwater Wind could not pay for that. So that's money that is put aside and is available for the decommissioning of the wind farm.
Chris, at the end of this life or somewhere during the life of these towers, these platforms, if, let's say, Deepwater finds this isn't really a profitable venture or whatever, both parties want out of the contract, can these platforms be repurposed for anything other than wind power, i.e. fracking, oil, natural gas, or anything along those lines?
Well, I think the design of the wind farm is such that I think there is still a usable life left, but you have to prove that. So you have to take samples and do fatigue tests, and then you can prove that you might be able to use the wind farm for other purposes. That might be an option.
So from an engineering standpoint, these could be reused for the purposes of natural gas or oil or some other mining
I would say it's
process.
unlikely that it can be used for natural gas or for fossil fuels because...
It's unlikely?
It's unlikely because that's not in the permitting. So we will never get a permit for that. But, you know, as something...
It's a question that obviously is going to come up.
Yeah.
To be really clear about that, we do not have rights to do anything other than offshore wind.
I understand that.
The lease that has been issued by the federal government is exclusively for offshore wind. And the legislation at the federal level only allows leasing for offshore wind. So it's not simply a matter of us, if we wanted to drill for oil there or gas there, it's not just that even if we could convince the Department of Interior to allow us to do that, they would have to go back and amend federal law to do that. So from a technical perspective, you know, these structures are designed similarly to oil and gas structures, but we do not have the rights to do anything other than wind power on the site.
And to finish the answer, we have to prove what the cost of decommissioning is, and that is reviewed by an independent third party. So it's not that we say 10 million or 20 million. So it's really a study that we have to prove what the removal is, and we have to fund the removals, the cost for those removals. and have that as an independent fund.
And Chris, is that cost adjusted to real dollars?
Yes.
At the end of the,
Yes,
at the end of the
that's the
contract?
case.
Okay.
John, Aldred, did you have a question? Francesca, you're next. Gary, do you want to go after that? You'll be third.
Well, Francesca's already spoken.
Did she?
She already asked a question.
I had a couple of small questions that are sort of packaged into one larger question. The larger question basically is, we heard, the trustees heard a presentation by one of the baymen earlier this year. His concerns were electromagnetic frequencies. As this line is coming ashore, and how that might impact the migration of fish along the shore. So my first question is, you say there's a hard pan down there, but I think it was in the town board presentation, you also said that you would have to actually bore down to get the final depth of this thing and consistency of this thing. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but my question is, how do you know that's down there? And at what depth it is now? And then could you determine, based on the depth that you're going to bury the cable, what the consistency of the cable is, the capacity of the cable is, the casing that's going to be around the cable, and the the depth below the bottom, what the electromagnetic field would be at the level that fish would be migrating through that zone? Can you state your name for the record? My name's John Aldred.
Yeah, a couple of things. There's no scientific evidence of electromagnetic fields impacting fish migration. Number two, for the purposes of our permits, EMF is one thing that has to be studied and presented as part of the permit applications. So for us to satisfy the conditions we talked about tonight of putting these studies forward, we have to demonstrate that. In terms of your question about the hard pan, we know that the hard pan's there because in certain extreme events it's exposed. And so we will determine the exact depth of it through a set of geotechnical investigations that will identify exactly where it is. We will then engineer our cable route to go under that so that for the entire area under the beach, it's at least 10 feet beneath the proven top of that hard pan.
You said, excuse me for 1 second.
You'd have to come to the mic.
Come on up, Gary.
Well, John is done, but it's part of John's question. You had said that data would be available by this meeting. At the meeting of the work session, you said that geotechnical data would be available tonight.
We have certain data, happy to talk about it, but go ahead, John, and we'll come back to that. If you have a follow-up.
It's my understanding that BOEM has funded some studies of electromagnetic frequencies on fish migration. One in San Francisco Bay and one which I believe is just finishing up in Long Island Sound. So will you be using, will you be able to use that data to make some predictions about what kind of frequencies will emanate up into the water column?
Short answer is yes. We'll be using those data, but we'll also be using actual engineering data from the cables that we are intending to use specifically and generating our own EMF models based on those cables and what we know about both the burial depth design and about the soil consistency.
I think, Francesca, if you want to go first, then Gary, then Chuck again.
Francesca Rhiannon. Basically, I want to re-ask a question I asked before to see that it gets answered, but put it in a larger context. earlier in the presentation tonight, we were told that that the wind turbines, and first of all, I want to say I'm completely in favor of clean, renewable energy. So I'm not opposed to that. If we're going to survive this century, we need it. But we also know that because of climate change, we're going to have increasingly more intense storms. And what we were told is that these turbines were being designed for a worst-case scenario of 97 miles per hour, which is not a worst-case scenario. So because a worst-case scenario, and we've already seen a Category 3 hurricane here in 1938, we could be seeing Category 4, Category 5 hurricanes like what we saw in Puerto Rico as our waters warm. So my question is, what kind of planning is being done on the engineering and design to anticipate, as the Dutch so well do, with 1,000-year plans? This doesn't seem to be a 1,000-year plan here, plans for 1,000-year storms. What kind of anticipation is being done on the engineering for more intense storms? And the other question is, if these windmills do go down in a Category 4 or 5 or even 3 storm, and this is really a question for the community, we need to build in some resilience and redundancy. We cannot just depend on a wind farm to supply most of our energy. We need to have more distributed systems. So I guess that's really a comment, not a question. But if you could answer the question about the storms.
I think I can answer that as a Dutchman. But using American wind speeds. So checking on the wind farm, also in my presentation was that we are checking for the 1,000 year, which is the worst case. So how they design it in Europe, the criteria for Europe is the 50-year return storm. In the United States, that has been increased to the 100-year to take into account the hurricane conditions that you don't have in Europe, but you have on the East Coast and also California. And to take into account for the future, that's why they do the 1,000-year return, which is even worse. And that 1,000-year is specifically mentioned, so to prepare for the future, that in the 25 years that the wind farm will be operating, that the worsening condition, which I agree with, are taken into account as well. So that's the way the standards take the future development or heavier storms into account. The figure I mentioned was for the Block Island wind farm. That's the design wind speed. But Block Island was checked for a Hurricane 3 storm, and all major components will survive. You know, you might have a problem with a small handrail or something, but the essential turbine, foundation, all will survive a Hurricane 3 storm. I don't know yet the South Fork one, because that's more exposed and further away. So that will have different criteria, and it might come close to a Hurricane Cat 4. So that's how we prepare for the future.
Gary? Chuck, you want once before? Let Gary go first, all right?
Yeah, Chuck, go ahead, sorry.
Gary Cobb, Springs. I've got several questions, but they're technical in nature, and you're supposed to have your technical people here tonight, so. They all pretty much relate to the same thing, the cable landing and the directional drilling that's going to be involved. How many conduits are going in?
We designed it around a single conduit.
What's the diameter of the conduit?
Don't know the diameter of the conduit yet.
What's the diameter of the cable?
It depends on whether we go for...
What are you going to go for?
Well, you can go for an aluminum
what are you going to go for?
So it will be probably, and that is plus or minus 1 or 2 inch, an 18-inch cable.
What happened
the conduit will probably be 24 inch.
The conduit's going to be 24 inch?
Yeah, probably.
You're going to put in an 18-inch cable?
Yeah.
What's the capacity of an 18-inch cable? The electrical capacity? Is it,
well, it's
in
designed for 100 megawatt peak.
In excess of 90 megawatts?
Yeah, well, yeah. you always have some margin on your,
My real question would be, is this conduit and cable designed for other than, you've said 11 or 12 twice tonight, we've been told 15. Is it being designed for more than 15?
It's not being designed for
Is
any
it
more than
capable of
15.
handling more than 15?
The South Fork grid is very weak. The reason this project exists is because the South Fork grid needs reinforcement.
At present?
And so, this project is never going to have more than 15 wind turbines. The South Fork wind farm will be 15 wind turbines.
Through that conduit, in that cable, in town roads, only enough capacity for 15 turbines?
Only enough capacity for 15 turbines.
Okay.
The grid can't take any more than that.
Currently?
We're designing this, and
You
on
answered
the
my-
record,
you
it's
answered my question.
15 turbines, no more than 15 for the South Fork wind farm, and no more capacity in the cable, in the roads, than the full output of those 15 wind turbines.
Gotcha. What's the quantity of the excavate that's going to come out of that conduit? How much excavated material, and what are you going to do with it once it comes out?
There's a full plan around how that's managed. Chris can probably talk in more detail around that, but this is material that is drilled out and it's handled on
I'm
site.
very familiar with directional drilling. Bigger than 24 inch still.
yeah. So this is limited, and as you know, they use a flushing
Yes,
method
a slurry.
to slurry to spool out.
What's the material that you use for the slurry?
Bentonite.
Okay, for the audio, when everybody has to speak into the mic, all right? So that's
Yeah,
what
have
the
to take
camera
turns.
folks were saying for the
So you're going to
folks
use
at home.
you're going to use a bentonite slurry
Bentonite, which is a natural clay slurry.
in a 24 inch casing,
Yes.
an 18 inch cable. That's what you said.
That's the design at the moment.
And you don't know what you're going
Don't
to do?
take me on 1 or 2 inch.
And
plus
what
or minus.
happens with the slurry at the end of Beach Lane that comes out of that boring? The bentonite slurry? Where
Normally,
does it go?
that will be disposed of, so we have to work with the contractor on how that's taken care of.
So you don't know right now? You mentioned that there would be, that there's approximately 6 jobs that were created, permanent job positions from the Block Island Wind Farm, and there may be more because this is a larger project here, based in Montauk. What are those job titles in Block Island? Is it one secretary, one receptionist? What are the job titles?
Gary, let them approach the mic, please, so they can speak to the audience.
Sorry.
There is one maintenance manager who is the party chief for the technicians of the wind farm. So he organizes the maintenance. And then you have several technicians. So an electrical technician, a mechanical technician, and 3 or 4 of each of them. And they can maintain and do the preventive maintenance of the wind farm. And the party chief is organizing that. We also have the crew transfer vessel.
Is there an electrical servicing platform attached to the wind farm?
Yeah, there is a substation, and so there is also technicians necessary to service that substation.
And you spoke of a CVA that inspects the work on the ledge of the foundations. Who inspects the installation of the conduit and the cables from the landing to the substation? Who is your oversight? Who are your inspectors? Who does that?
Yeah, we are working with the permitting agency on what they require in that respect, and probably that's the CVA as well, so the certifying verification agent who is inspecting that. In this case, it can also be a licensed engineer who is checking the as-builts of all this work.
Is this a third party?
That's a third party, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, not again.
Hold on, Simon, Chuck was next, so if you could just hang on 1 second, please.
Hi, Chuck Maurice back again. I'd like to apply for that party management job.
You'd be good.
The original lease that you guys leased this land from, that was under the Department of Mineral and something. And then they changed the name on that, you know. I'm concerned about, you know, is it just windmills?
or is it natural gas? Department of Minerals. And then they changed it to...
Bureau of Ocean Energy.
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, that was in the last couple of years, they changed the name, you know? I'm not good with Jeopardy or anything, but fill me in on that.
Okay. The agency that's now known as the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, used to be known as the Minerals Management Service. It was reorganized in the wake of the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico. No relation.
Okay.
So that agency was reorganized and it was split into BOEM and BESI. BESI focuses on safety operations. BOEM focuses on leasing and permitting. BOEM is the agency that is responsible for oil and gas leasing. They are also the agency that's responsible for offshore wind energy leasing. Those activities are, BOEM has authority to conduct that leasing work under separate pieces of federal legislation. The legislation that gives them the ability to lease offshore wind is a different piece of law than what gives them the ability to lease for oil and gas. So if our lease, first of all, our leases do not permit anything other than offshore wind. We can't even restrict any activities within that site. We're only allowed to do construction and operations of offshore wind farms in that area. For those leases to be changed, you would have to change federal law, which is hard.
You're a fisherman, it's done every day.
This is to you, this gentleman's point before, so I don't know your name. Gary. This is Gary's point before about the conduits. This is a photograph of the conduit that you plan to put in on the road. So this is a photograph of from their presentation of a conduit that Deepwater Wind planned to put into the road. Could you tell us what the diameter of that conduit is?
This is an illustrative picture. I don't know the exact diameter of that. Chris has said that the diameter of this will be something in the range of a 24-inch conduit, but all of that will be laid out specifically within the permit application. And importantly, has to be specified in the easement document. So we can't get an easement document or a permit without having specified that.
You said the magic words, and that it has to be specified before the easement has been granted. Because we were told at the Wainscott CAC in August that it was a 160 kilovolt cable, and the cable diameter was going to be 7.5 inches. So now it's more than 3 times the thickness. So it does raise the question. You guys keep on changing the playing field, and we don't know what you're doing. And yet you're asking us to evaluate, and you want us to be partners in this venture. But it's difficult to do when we don't know what's happening.
One explanation there is that we had questions on the conduit, the HDD, and that's the submarine cable that lands, and that's 18-inch, something like that. Then we split the cable, and then we have smaller cables going into the land duct bank, and then we get back to the sizes that you mentioned. So there are 2 different cables. There are the terrestrial cables, and there's the submarine cable. Submarine cable is 1 cable with 3 conduits and the fiber optics. The land cables are separate cables and are smaller diameter.
So there's no 4th conduit for redundancy?
You have to come back up if you're going to speak, please. We have to have it on audio.
Sorry about this. There's no 4th cable for redundancy. A lot of sea cables have a 4th in case things go wrong for redundancy. The cheaper cables only have 3-phase. And by the way, it's the first time I've ever heard about a single cable going in and then that cable being split into many other cables. So it's changing every time I talk with you guys.
So, hey Chris, speaking to that, could you just clarify Your submerged cable from the turbines to shore is what diameter?
We think that the maximum diameter is 18-inch for that
Okay,
pump.
so that is your jet plowed
Yeah.
cable. Is that in conduit, or is that just direct burial? Or is it just a jacketed cable?
Offshore, you mean?
The offshore cables.
The offshore cable is a combined cable.
But is it in a conduit, or is it just a direct burial cable?
You mean the area from the wind farm?
From the turbines to Beach Lane?
It's a direct buried cable.
18 inches.
And part of the 18 inch is an armoring. So there is no separate conductor outside that cable.
Okay, at what point on the landing does it go from the 18-inch direct burial to a conduited cable? At what point? How far from shore, approximately?
The HDD ends in a fault, and that fault will have a termination where the submarine cable is terminated.
Approximately how far from mean high water, let's say?
It's about 250 meter, 800 feet is the plan for the fault.
250 feet back from the dunes on
Back
the
from the
land side, but I think
No,
your
no,
question is offshore.
My question is...
2,000 feet offshore.
2,000 feet offshore. This goes into a pull box.
Yes.
Where it's reconnected, it's split, it goes from there. It's a conduited cable.
Yes.
Is it an 8-inch diameter cable at that point, or is it larger?
No, it's not larger than that.
Okay. And with that, sharing maybe a separate conduit is your optical cable?
Yeah, and the question is, do we have a spare? That's not the plan. We have 3 conductors, and we have a fiber optic going in that duct bank.
Okay. So then when it hits the beach, last question, when it hits the beach, does it stay 8 inches in diameter, or is it adjusted again?
No, it stays that diameter.
Okay, so the burial down Beach Lane, Sayers Path, Wainscott Stone Road is all going to be in that 24-inch, I'm assuming, ID conduit?
Do we have the picture of...
Yeah, I was just going to ask if somebody can help. I think I killed the presentation.
I got the CD.
Yeah.
That's you.
You want a hand clip?
Yeah, if you could. So we've got a great illustrative image that shows what that will look like. So cable comes into the vault. That cable has armoring around it and 3 conductors inside of it. In addition to that, it also has the fiber optic communications wires. In that vault, the marine cable is anchored, so it stays in place, and then each one of those conductors is spliced together with an individual conductor, an individual wire, and those then will be buried inside concrete encased conduit.
Okay, so Chris, let's cut the crap here. How the frig many cables are landing on shore? Is it 3 cables?
1 cable.
One cable with 3 conductors inside.
3 conductors.
And the fiber optic.
And the fiber optic.
When we come back in January with Drew Carey, I will bring you a cross-section of the cable that we use for Block
it's
Island.
just, there seems to be questions in the audience related to this. I'd love to just get everybody settled on what you're actually doing.
Francis, got another hand raised out there.
You need other content on it?
No, it was just that one picture that showed the area under the beach. That's the correct one. I think it's...
Can you get Danny Farnham?
What's that?
You get Danny Farnham next.
I will, yes. Hey, Clint?
Yes.
Can you take another question while you're doing this?
Sure.
We're almost there.
There
we are.
Okay.
So, also for... I speak loud. If you don't hear me, then let me know.
Yeah.
So here is the submarine cable coming in, and in the HDD drill. And here you see the fault. That is the end of the HDD. So there is one cable of maximum 18-inch diameter coming in as submarine cable. That one is terminated in the fault here on Beach Lane. About 800,000 feet behind the dunes is the place of the fault at the moment, Clint, I think. Then we have a concrete duct bank, and that will contain 3 separate conductors, maximum 8-inch diameter, and the fiber optic in that duct bank. So here's the change on Beach Lane from the 1 cable into the 4 cables.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Sir?
Dan Farnham. Dan?
Then you'll be next, Dan.
I'm Dan.
Oh, you're Dan, sorry.
Dan Farnham, commercial fisherman from Montauk, New York. To speak on the protocol at the end of the lease, I know they said that there's a fund, I guess, for removal of the foundations. I just want to clarify that, is that legally binding, and will that remove the foundations down into the substrate, or will there be some kind of material left behind? Because even small amounts of like anything that sticks up is a hang for anyone who's fishing that area. And I know in practice, oil drilling platforms, a lot of times, even though they have the same financial instrument in place to remove them, there is pushback from the environmental community because they say we'll do more harm to the environment to remove it at that time. So a lot of times they're left in place to just rot. Then also like some kind of clarification on the size of the foundations, whether they're going to be single or multi-pronged foundations. What is the proposed timeframe for developing the rest of your lease area, specifically the southern lease area, or the southern half of your lease area? And when does your lease expire on the entire area? Is it 25 years from the start of construction in one area, then you lose the rest of the area at that time? And also, similar to what Hank said, a fund, is there going to be some kind of fund set up for reimbursing commercial fishermen who are impacted by this? Because when you do fisheries management, the only input control for fisheries management is reducing fishing effort. So any fish stocks negatively impacted by windmills, whether it's construction or operation, that all comes off the backs of commercial fishermen down the road, because that is the only way you can rebuild injured fish stocks in our current management schemes. And I'd also like to see some kind of information on the ability of foreign fleets to fish in there, in the UK, for example, the ability of the mobile gear fleet to fish in that area where windmills have been established. Because I know after speaking to some Bay State or Bay Wind representatives, I believe, they said the majority of mobile gear fleet no longer fishes in that area, and the small number of people who do continue to fish there can't once any kind of weather arises. It's either due to safety or the actual inability for the mobile gear fleet to fish in those areas. Thank you.
That's a very thoughtful list of questions. It's a long list of questions. If you don't mind staying up here, I want to make sure that I respond to all of your questions. So let's start off with those kind of one at a time. Your first question had to do with the decommissioning and what happens at the end of that line. We have to propose a decommissioning plan, and we separately have to come up with a decommissioning fund that is held in escrow so that at the end of the useful life, there's sufficient money in place to be able to execute the agreed upon decommissioning plan. We're in the process of developing that decommissioning plan now as we prepare our permit applications. That's one of the reasons that we would like to engage with the commercial fishing community here to get input on that. That's why we have Julia Prince, and that's why we're in the process of bringing on fisheries representatives, and we want that dialogue to make sure that it's reflective of what actually works for the fishing community. That plan hasn't yet been fully developed. It will be developed and will be put forward publicly as part of our permit applications. That was one. Remind me of your second question.
I'd like to know info on the ability of mobile gear fleet to continue to fish within the wind farm area, specifically about the spacing of the windmills.
Yes.
And the size of the platforms or the foundations.
Sure. A couple of questions based in there, so let me take those one at a time. As it relates to the ability of mobile gear to work within that area, we will not restrict, nor will we ask for any restrictions, nor do we have the ability to restrict any fishing of any form or any other activity within the wind farm area. That means mobile gear, that means fixed gear, that means up-down guys. Anybody can fish. And if you go to Block Island today, and I think the point of Chris's recreational fishing survey was to show that there's actually been an increase in fishing activity at the bases of the wind turbines. Now, that's just Block Island, and I know that's not going to satisfy you, but
that's just recreational.
Yeah, I understand that's just recreational, but my point is, we're not restricting anybody, and there's data and evidence that we're not restricting anybody. And then as it relates to the foundation type, we're evaluating a number of potential foundation designs. The base case is what we use successfully with Block Island, which are those four-legged jacket structures. There are two other types of foundations that could be used here. One's called a monopile. It's a big singular pile that's driven into the seafloor. Another's called a gravity-based foundation. That's basically like a big circular piece of concrete that sits on the ocean floor but doesn't have any impact pile driving associated with that. We're in the process, based on the data that Chris presented tonight, of determining which one or ones of those we want to carry into permitting. We'll put that forward as part of our permit applications in the coming months. We just haven't gotten to the point of fully engineering that yet.
Is that legally binding that you remove all the structures? I know you set up the financial vehicle
Yes.
for it, but is it legally binding at the end of that lease term?
The plan, our permits, and our lease are all tied together and are legally binding. So we are in default of our lease if we fail to abide by the provisions of the full set of permits, including the decommissioning plan. So yes, it's legally binding.
Okay.
And at that point, in addition to it being, obligatory on us, we've already paid the money. There's no reason for us to fight it. We don't have the money in our pockets. It's sitting in the escrow account. So that money goes to take the wind farm down.
And the expiration of the lease area?
The lease, so first of all, the leases are public. You can go look at our lease right now. It's available on the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's website. Rick referred to earlier, it's referred to as the REMA, Wind Energy Area. So if you just Google BOEM, REMA, you can find our lease there and you can read it for yourself. But the lease is for a term of 25 years after the start of commercial operations.
And that's for the entire lease area, not like northern, southern area of this? It's not just the individual blocks that you construct that on?
So within the REMA wind energy area, there are two discrete leases. If anyone's writing this down, it's 0486 and 0487 is the south. So those are independent leases. Within those leases, the trigger starts when the project starts operating.
So that would be for the whole northern area?
Yes.
Your lease, correct. Do you have any data on, I know you said you wouldn't be able to restrict fishing activity, and obviously so, but on that actual inability of the mobile gear fleet to fish in that area? I know it's been documented, or in practice, that most of the mobile gear fleet is no longer able to fish within wind farm areas. I mean, physically able, not legally prohibited in the UK and in other European countries.
Yeah, so a couple of things. There's only one of these in the US right now. If you go to our website, there's actually a video of trawling taking place in between the wind turbines. To the best of my knowledge, the reason why there's restrictions within Europe is that many of those wind farms are old, and they were built at a time when turbines were smaller, and as a result, the turbines were a lot closer together. So the physical distances are just different in Europe. Going back, remember, the first offshore wind farm was built 25 years ago, and the reps from Bay State Wind would probably have been referencing that because they're a European company.
Excuse me, Clint?
Yes.
Would Deepwater be willing to make commitments to make sure there's ample room for mobile gear to be able to fish between the turbines in the REMA area?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've said so far is that the wind turbine spacing is designed to be in the range of about a mile. So, 0.8 miles at kind of the closest, maybe 0.7, but we're happy to continue to talk about that. And all that is part of our permit applications, and, we have to have those type of specifications in our permit applications.
Dan, would you have a recommendation as to spacing?
The more spacing between them, the better, obviously. Not so much in this area, but in their southern area and in some of the other areas being developed by the wind companies. There's a lot of not gear conflict, but we've kind of come to understandings, as in Lobstermen move their strings east-west along the 0s and 5s of the Loran lines. And then the mobile gear fleet kind of works in between them. But when you start shoving everyone into the troughs between these windmills, because no one's going to be able to fish like right next to them, obviously, then that's when you start having gear conflicts. And also, when weather arises, that's when it becomes dangerous to no longer be able to fish there. Like I know with our mobile gear, when we can have gear up to a quarter mile behind the boat. So when you're trying to make a turn or maneuver behind them, you're not mobile. And then if you have any kind of mechanical breakdown, that's when you start getting snarled, entangled, or possibly wreck on one of these structures.
So this is exactly why we want to have this type of dialogue. This is great input, and I would like to sit down with you and with Julia and just spend some time going through this, because this is the type of dialogue that we want to have, and this is what we want to actually inform our permit applications, and ultimately how we design the project. And I would just submit to this board, I came here 8+ months ago in April, less than a month after we actually were awarded the project. We put out one set of ideas on where to bring the cable ashore. We got feedback. We changed in response to what we heard. So, we want to be working with the community, and we're willing to adapt our plans to make it work best for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
No,
Kevin?
no,
Sorry.
back there.
Back in the back?
Yep.
My name's Wesley Peterson. I'm a commercial fisherman from Montauk. Mostly my biggest question is your research and trawl surveys. Okay, you said you hired the captain to do these surveys and this research and all these trawl surveys. Is there an independent third party verifying your findings?
Answer is yes. There's an independent scientist. It's Drew Carey, who was in presenting previously. And we're happy, and we've committed to have Dr. Carey come back and present on the findings of that research.
Okay, is Dr. Carey paid for by you?
Yes.
Okay, so that is not an independent survey or study. He is paid for by you. That would be something like Philip Morris telling you that cigarettes don't cause cancer. Because you cannot, he's being paid for by you, correct?
Yeah, but hey, Wes, regardless of who is hired to do the surveys, it's going to be an independent surveyor, but somebody's paying them, okay? And I don't think you want to pay them, and I don't think the trustees or the town necessarily wants to pay them. What you do have to do is you got to get an individual who has some credibility, who has some credentials, and literally their livelihood depends on honest reporting on these things. So regardless, it's a little like when you do an electrical system in a house, you should be able to relate to this. You have to hire an underwriter to come in, you pay the guy to inspect the service. They're gonna have to pay essentially an underwriter to come in and oversee this. Now, it may be a case where the fishing community, if they're skeptical about the results of these things, perhaps you guys could work together to approve an individual to do those trawls. Fair enough?
Fair enough, but I can't go into Rhode Island state waters.
Well, exactly, but
So-
somebody's...
I agree with you completely, but the problem is fishermen don't trust the government because of
I don't blame you.
bad science. We've been literally put out of business.
You have good reason. But I think a dialogue like this has an opportunity to work some of those kinks out to everybody's satisfaction here. Okay, and where the deep water site is, do you guys fish out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Cox's Ledge. It's the
All right.
historic southern New England
I know.
groundfish ground.
So, all right, that said, the
trawls that are occurring for this, we're not talking about doing trawls at Block Island, okay? But the trawls related to this project, I think that's something that could be negotiated, correct? You guys would make a firm commitment on that?
My other question is, the concrete mats, you say they can be towed over correctly?
That's correct.
There's been instances of Rhode Island draggers being stuck and losing gear on your concrete mats. So what happens when the concrete mat gets moved off of your cable?
That's not good because there is no protection anymore. So we are doing surveys that that's not the case, and otherwise we have to put that back. But we also, when those things occur, which should not occur, we have to work with the fishermen how we can stop that happening, because that's not good for either party. So we're working together with the fishermen on that.
And another quick question is, you didn't mention any sea scallopers where you go across the rocks. They can tow through anything. There's nothing that stops a 100-foot, 1,000-horsepower scalloper. They will take your concrete mats and turn them to rubble. If there's any scallops there they can work on to make money, they will just destroy it. So I don't think there was nothing. Yes, there was trawl surveys. No. Do most mobile gear fishermen tow through the rocks? No. But do scallopers? Yes. I mean, they work up on George's. They catch bags of rocks. They put in little rock chains that are 6 inches by 6 inches to keep their rocks out. So I don't think that was, in your presentation, because a little concrete mat that's the size, how big, bigger than the table?
No, it's 4 times the table.
They'll move that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So and then you have it going through the outside hole, through the rock pile, through CIA. Those are all mobile gear sea scallop grounds.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. What happens when those concrete mats disappear? And one of those 1,000-horsepower scallopers tows up your cable.
Well, that's why we do thorough and constant surveys of the mattresses, and they are all there. And so at this moment, nothing has moved yet.
There's been boats in Rhode Island that have moved the mats, lost nets and moved mats.
We've received no reports of that, and we've conducted surveys on the entire cable route with videography that shows that they've not been moved.
There's boats that have hung up solid, straight up and down on your mats in Block Island.
I would posit, how would you know that it was on our mats?
Because if a person's been fishing there for 25 years, making the same tow, over and over for 25 years, your cable goes through, your mats are laid down, and then all of a sudden they hang up and lose a $15,000 net, or possibly sink their boat, what else could it be?
Here's the facts that we know as of today.
Clint, could you step to the mic?
Sorry. Try not to be awkward. So first, we haven't received any reports of this, and we have fisheries liaisons and representatives working with us in Rhode Island on this. Number two, we've done videography survey along the whole cable route, and we've seen no evidence that the mats have been moved.
But have fishermen gotten stuck on your mats?
We have received no, we haven't heard from anybody that they've been hung up on our mats.
Well, I will get you a phone number and a person that's been hung up on
Have somebody, please,
No,
have them
we
contact
went through
us.
this at the last trustee meeting. The mats, people get stuck on the mats. You say you can tow over them, you can't. I'm fishing the same bottom my grandfather fished 70 years ago. You don't get stuck. It's mud, it's sand. You put these giant concrete mats over the rocks where guys used to, you could tow through a spot that's maybe a little bit bigger than this building. In between the rocks, you get through, you get out. You start putting concrete mats there, guys are gonna get stuck. Their toe ends, and that toe is completely shot.
We're happy to talk to anybody who's actually had a problem. We just have not heard from anybody that's had a problem. If you've got somebody, have them get in touch with Julia.
Okay.
Clint, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You have a captain that is doing trawls.
Captain Rodman Sykes.
Has he towed over the mats to test them with mobile gear? Wes uses?
I don't know the answer to that question, Rick. I can answer that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I do know that he's towed over the cables because he's towed between the wind turbines, and as a necessity, you would have to go over the cables if you're going between the wind turbines. I just don't know whether he's towed over the mats.
Just saying, just as part of due diligence to make sure that,
Yeah.
And to go back to another slide, your avian studies, okay, you said there's no greater, I should say, bird life that is out there? Well, I mean, like any amount of ducks that are there on a daily basis?
So we have to do a very comprehensive set of bird surveys. And yes, in certain areas around Block Island, there are foraging ducks. there are a number of species there. We went through a 3-year avian and bat investigation, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, along with a dozen other agencies, came back and said, there's no significant impact to any avian species whatsoever. We have to go through the same type of thorough survey for this project.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin? Oh,
Thank you. Kevin McAllister. I have a question on the jet plow. It's really been a burning question with respect to the impacts of the Benthic community. There's a certain area of the swath of, I guess, the plow and the jetting. Was it 6 foot in swath, am I correct? Or
It's 6 feet deep.
okay, so that area over 35 miles approximate, is there an approximation, and I know it would have to be, of course, an estimated, but with respect to the actual impacts, displacement versus mortality, extrapolated over that distance, will, forgive me, the gentleman's name that's coming in?
Drew Carey.
Drew Carey, thank you, I'm drawing a blank. Will Drew be able to speak to that?
Drew will be able to nerd out about a lot of different factors, and I do know that he's up to speed on specific issues around suspended sediment, impacts to the seafloor, and issues around displacement.
Okay, so I look forward to that. I think it's, I would respectfully ask, I think that needs to be quantified. What are the true impacts? Again, is it displacement, or are we looking at mortality in the course of laying this cable? And I know it's an episodic event. I agree the recovery will be rapid, but are we knocking out biomass in laying this cable? So
yeah,
thank you.
And that's is a great point. I mean, that was one of the pieces of feedback that we got going back to April, when we had proposed the initial route of going through the bay and coming into Napeague. And based on those factors and the feedback we received from the community about those concerns, we amended our route and are now looking at a different location. We'll get back to you on that when Drew Carey's back.
Thank you, Michael Cinque, I'm a Gansett resident. Heard a lot of stuff, but my big question is, it seems like somebody's spending a whole lot of money here, and somebody's probably gonna make a lot of money, but also the town needs to have a support team to follow all this, whether it's roads and whole development. Have we budgeted that as town? Along with that, PSE&G is a rate-based business. Are we paying a whole lot more for this now? And then that gets to, I guess my simple question is, 5 years from now, it's getting harder and harder to make a living working around here, but is this going to cost us more money for electricity and all? It's just a simple question.
Michael, I think the answer is yes.
Have we heard that, Beth? And is there anybody from PSE&G here?
But the positive side of that, Michael, is it's going to be subsidized by all of the other rate payers on Long Island.
So none of the power goes west?
Why don't we have Clint speak to that?
Okay. And also the other question, I'll be done, is there should be something else to back it up just in case. We shouldn't just depend on that. That was a great question.
Yeah. Yep. So you asked a number of questions. So let me just make sure that I answer all of them in order. I think the first question is, are rates going to go up? The simple answer to that is maybe, but less than they would in any other outcome. And the reason for that is that LIPA needs new sources of power here. They ran a competitive solicitation because they needed new sources of power. The original intent of that solicitation was to buy a new fossil-fired peaker plant like the one that's currently at Buell Lane that runs a lot during the summer months. That's very expensive, it's very noisy, and it's very dirty. LIPA got 21 different bids in response to that RFP. We were one of those bids. They compared all of those bids to one another, and then they compared them to the cost of building a new transmission system to serve that same need. Yeah, and so the point is, something has to be built. We are the cheapest thing that could be built. So we are in the best interest of the ratepayers, because anything else would have cost more.
So is there a line item, I didn't see that earlier, that's going to give, support any employees, any management from this town, so that my taxes also don't go up because of this entity?
So what we have said is that Deepwater is committed to funding the full cost of the infrastructure improvements that we're making in Wainscott, and that we will also reimburse the town for its cost of project management associated with that.
For the life of the project?
For the full term of our construction activity. And we are separately paying the town, remember, either rent or an upfront payment for the use of that real estate. So we are putting forward the community benefits package, we're funding the town in its project management costs during the construction, and we're paying either rent or an upfront payment, however the town wants it, on the use of that real estate for the full life of the project.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
David?
David Fink, live in Wainscott. My question is, you've spoken a lot about things will happen essentially over the next 30 years, since a 25-year period will start roughly 5 years from now. 10 years ago, we saw Lehman Brothers go bankrupt. We saw General Motors go bankrupt. With all due respect, what happens if you go bankrupt? Are you providing performance bonds to meet your financial obligations to the town and town trustees to back up your obligations for the next 30 years?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. First of all,
it really calls for a yes or a no. Are you providing performance bonds to cover all your financial obligations?
We will either pre-fund or provide performance bonds. That's part of the negotiation of the easements. We haven't negotiated those easements yet, but I imagine that the town and the trustees will ask for that type of security. We're happy to provide that type of security.
Well, I'm talking about all your obligations. For example, if during a storm, there's a Category 4 hurricane, something's wrecked or financial conditions, you go broke, will there be a performance bond to back up all your obligations?
Well, if something goes wrong during a storm, that's our obligation to fix it. There's no obligation to the town in that case.
If your company goes bankrupt, then you're released from all your obligations, or there's no money to pay for it. My question is, well, do you know what I mean by performance bond?
No, I know exactly what you mean by a performance bond. I think what you're asking, let me make sure I'm understanding you, is around the obligation we have to pay rent or an easement fee to the town associated with the use of that real estate.
No, all your obligations to whatever you're promising the town and the town trustees, will all of that be backed up by a performance bond for the duration of till the end of the 25-year period, which apparently will be roughly 30 years from now?
Well, so what I think I just said was yes, and that our proposal on the payment of the easements, the other obligations, are that we're proposing to just pay them up front.
There are some things that you don't know what they'll cost. If one of these concrete blocks causes a ship to sink, a fisherman's ship, I don't know what might happen. Will your obligations be backed up by a performance? All your obligations, not just under the easement, not just this, not just that. Will all your obligations be backed up by a performance bond? Everything that you're promising to do.
Everything that we're promising to do for the town, or the trustees, will either be pre-funding or will be providing security that's negotiated with the town and the trustees. And that'll be backed up by a form of security that they find acceptable to them.
that will be of a nature that cannot be voided in bankruptcy?
I think what I'm saying is we have a finite set of obligations here, and our proposal was to simply fund them in advance so that the town is taking no security risk on us.
Are you saying you'll fund in advance, for example, the cost of removing these platforms 30 years from now?
We're saying that we have to start funding as soon as we are operating the decommissioning fund. So our permits, and by the way, that's an obligation of the federal government, but our permits from the federal government are going to obligate us to begin funding that reserve as soon as we start operating.
I understand that, but that means,
Oh, and
by
are there bonds associated
definition,
with that? Yeah.
5 years from now.
No, there are absolutely bonds associated with that. And I'm sorry, I got confused by what you're saying. But yes, we will have bonds for our performance to the federal government under our federal permits. We'll have bonds to the state in our state commitments. We'll have, security to the town, whether the town and the trustees prefer a bond or they prefer that we just fund it in advance. We can negotiate that. But I think I understand what you mean now. Will our obligations to do what we say we're going to do be backed up by some form of surety, like a bond? Then the answer is yes. And in fact, you can see that we've done that because we already have those types of bonds in place for the Block Island Wind Farm.
Of the type that will not be voided in bankruptcy, if bankruptcy occurs.
Yes, they are. That's the exact reason why they exist. They are bankruptcy protected.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second, Dan. Rachel, I think you're next, then Dan.
Hi, Rachel from Amagansett. Since we have the pleasure of Mr. Van Beek's presence here, could you kindly tell us a little bit more about the liquefaction process by which the cable over 30 miles is going to be laid? The community is trying to better understand some of these marine environmental impacts. Is there any chemical that's injected into the ground to do that liquefaction and liquefaction? You can clarify for me? And what happens to that injected material if it exists? Thank you.
Liquefaction takes place by just seawater. So it's their own water that is pumped under high pressure in front of the cable, 10,000 psi with 20 nozzles. And that at a certain spot creates that liquefaction of the soil, temporary, and will allow the cable to get to the burial depth. But there is no other liquid than just seawater that is used to be pumped under high pressure into the seabed.
Is there much dispersal?
Rachel, come back to the podium, please.
Yeah, much
please repeat your question, please.
The question would be, is there much dispersal of sediment? So I imagine with that pressure, there's a lot of material disrupted.
Not really. There is some, and that's part of a full study that is conducted. So it will show how much that is. But it's rather the soil that stays liquid. So, and there is a plumb around that, but not too much. So it stays really in that trench that is made by the cable. But there will be a full study, and you can see the results on that the dispersion is very limited.
One brief follow-up to that. Yeah. So thank you for that. And then another follow-up question. Is your company currently constructing these wind turbines, these wind farms in Europe? And whether that be the case, could you kindly speak to the trends in Europe right now? Approximately how many of these wind farms are being developed in Europe? I understand your history is possibly about 20 years longer than ours in the U.S., or you can speak to that. Thank you.
Yeah, our company, Deepwater Wind, is purely a U.S. company. So we are not building any wind farm in Europe, and we are not involved in any wind farm, offshore wind farm in Europe. Separately, The industry on offshore wind in Europe is huge. I think this year there are about 10, 12 wind farms coming online. And these wind farms are probably on average 400 megawatt, so 4 times as large as South Fork. So it's a huge industry in Europe, and that is planned for the coming years as well. So it's an ongoing business. The good thing is that there are a lot of developments in Europe, and we can learn a lot from that. So we're making use of the latest technology in Europe and apply that in the United States to get these wind farms at the most cost-effective level here in the United States.
So I'd like Dan to speak, but I'll just follow up by stating thank you for that. And as has been asked in previous meetings, it would be wonderful if we could see some sort of meta-analysis of European data. I'm sure there are studies up the wazoo over decades of environmental impacts, how the wind farms have worked with the local fisheries on management schemes. So it would be great if you could help us to have that download of information, since we're really at the forefront here in the U.S. and we're trying to grapple with all of these planning and management challenges. Thank you.
Clint, do you want to respond to that briefly?
Sure. First of all, our permitting and general approach to outreach is grounded in science and engineering. So we agree. We think it's incredibly important to understand what we're doing and to be able to communicate that. Part of the reason that we brought on board Drew Carey as a consultant was to help advise us on these. You asked a lot of very good questions. As a non-science person, but someone who appreciates science, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask those directly, because Drew Carey will be back in January, and I'd like to invite you to come back. And Drew has at his fingertips a lot of those studies. I know this because I've seen him present on them previously, and so we will have those answers available. To the extent that you asked for a meta-analysis of those studies, I don't know whether or not that type of meta-analysis exists, but we can follow up on that.
Dan?
How you doing? Dan Lester, Commercial Bayman, Town of East Hampton. I think my question that I have is I'd like to see some data on what the cable does to the migration of fish. We fish inshore. I don't own a trawler. I fish from the beach. Perfect example, this thing's going right next to Georgia Pond, and when the trustees open it in the spring and the fall, the fish migrate along. They go in and out of the pond, as do every species of fish that swims, along the coast. Even the guys with the trawlers, striped bass, bluefish, fluke, porgies, everything that comes into our bay has to migrate along the ocean. I guess what I want to see is I want to see some sort of study on what that cable does, if it affects the fish at all. And then also, I believe the gentleman in the yellow sweater, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but I think he was asking too, if there's not a study and this thing goes forward, what happens when this thing's up and running and all of a sudden I'm not catching any fish because of this cable messed up the migration of the fish? How am I to be compensated? Is there going to be a fund put in place to help us if something goes wrong or if this messes up the whole fish migration?
Yep. So first of all, part of the process that we're trying to start by getting the necessary conditions in the easements to start the permitting process is what's called scoping, which the federal agencies have to do. We're already anticipating doing specific studies on the cable as it relates to every aspect of the environment, including fish habitats. So that's already part of it. If we get the rights to proceed and start our scoping, we'll be able to come forward to the public with the agencies that are doing our oversight on the exact scopes of the studies that we have to conduct, and that will then become public and will be the basis for those agencies to decide whether or not to grant us the permits to go forward. As it relates to fishing impacts itself, we believe that this installation can be done in such a way that it won't impact fishing populations. If it does, we'll deal with that on a business-to-business basis in the same way that we have in Block Island. We're committing that there's an individual here that's able to interact on a day-to-day basis with members of the fishing community, and that we'll deal with that just like we did with Block Island. When there were issues, we dealt with each member of the fishing community there.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah.
So this has come up before, Clint, and I think, Dan, you seem to be asking the question. Is Deepwater willing to set aside or set up a fund to indemnify the fishermen against any losses? And if you're right about the studies, if you're right about your science, it's a bet you can't lose. But you know, I can appreciate these guys, because it wasn't so long ago that there was a company called General Electric that said everything was going to be cool on the Hudson River. Okay, these guys were locked out of business for how long?
Long time.
Okay, and yes, they did get some compensation from General Electric, but it was many, many years in coming, and it was far less than probably the true losses there. So that's where these comments from Dan Farnham's coming. That's where the comments from these guys are coming. And at some point, I think we're going to have to seriously address that.
And, you know, don't take it the wrong way. We're not here asking for money by any means. We want to go to work. That's all. We just don't want our work messed with. We just want to be able to go to work every day, do what we always do. But in the future, is there going to be something there to help us if we are indeed put out of business? Because trust me, we've been put out of business before, and it's not fun.
Yeah, understood. And so recognize the position. So first of all, understand that our primary focus is on doing everything that we can over the development, the engineering, permitting, and the construction of the project to keep you working and to have zero to as minimal as possible impact on what you're doing. That's why it's so important that the fishing community work with Julia, and when we get a fisheries representative on board, that we have good two-way communication throughout the whole development and permitting process. So that's critical. We need that input from you to make sure that it's done in the right way. As it relates to any form of mitigation or funds, those are things that have, as Chucky Marisi referred to earlier, a huge amount of regulation. So for us to be able to get into that level of detail, we would have to go through the proper channels. We're committed to doing that. We have to get approvals from National Marine Fisheries Service, from DEC, and I know that those are 2 four-letter words here, but we have to get permits from them. And so we have to work with them and structure anything that we do with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Clint, may I ask a question on that?
Yeah, please.
With regard to the EMFs.
Yes.
And Block Island.
Yeah.
It seems like we have a test bed in place.
Absolutely.
And do you have data regarding the cable coming to Shoretown Beach on EMF emissions in that area?
I know that we did a very exhaustive set of studies based on the exact cable that we're going to install and based on how deep it was going to be and kind of the soil composition in advance of getting our permits. I don't know whether or not we've done any post-installation EMF surveys on that site. And Chris, I don't know if you know that off the top of your head.
No, I don't think so, but we can check and come back when Drew is here.
Yes.
Come back with what we have.
Was the Block Island cable an 18-inch cable?
Block Island cable was a smaller cable at a lower voltage.
Results would be irrelevant.
Actually, so this is where we get into electrical engineering, and so I'm not an electrical engineer, but what I've been advised on this is that lower voltages tend to have higher EMFs. But let's let the scientists and the engineers respond to that, and we'll be prepared
bring
with
that back in January?
When we come back in January.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have to wrap this up in about 5 minutes, so if anyone has a final question, but we do need to wrap this up. We have an agenda that we still have to address.
Hi, my name is Vicki Littman from Amagansett. I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
If you install the 15 turbines here, do you plan on expanding installing any more to the west? And if so, would you have to go back to Beach Lane to do any of the work? And then my second question is, after 25 years, say something happens to the turbines. We're discussing about, they'd be taken down, but what happens to the cable?
Oh, okay. First question, we're installing 15 wind turbines for the South Fork Wind Farm. We're designing that to be plugged into the substation here in East Hampton. Our constraint on that project is the amount of capacity that we can inject into that substation. So we can't push more power into that. Our wind area lease has enough space, if we fully build it out, for about 200 wind turbines. To do that, we have to get customers for those. That takes a long time. And then we have to go get permits. We will not build anything in this lease area further to the west. This is the furthest west extent of development in this lease area. Now, New York is contemplating future offshore wind development. We will likely participate in that. How we participate in that, I don't yet know. But what I do know is that there's not enough capacity on the grid today, nor is there enough planned for the future for us to deliver any more power other than the output of these 15 turbines into the East Hampton grid.
And what about the cable? What happens if you take down?
Oh, sorry. So there's a decommissioning plan that has to be put in place. That's got to go through the full environmental review process. As part of that, and part of the work we're doing now, is determining what is the most responsible way to decommission that cable. In some cases, that involves removing portions of the cable. In other cases, that involves leaving it in place because when buried, it's more disturbing to take it out of the ground. A lot of that depends on the specific cable technology that we're proposing. That'll be put forward in our permit applications, along with the full decommissioning plan. We haven't finalized that yet, but that'll be what we put forward and what is then part of the public review.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Hey, does anyone have a final question from the audience?
The cable once installed.
Gary, can you please come up to the podium?
The offshore cable to the vault is owned by Deepwater?
Deepwater owns the cable all the way
to
from...
the substation?
Yeah, Deepwater owns the entire route of the
Perpetuity,
cable.
forever.
We own it.
Unless LIPA was to buy it from you,
Yeah.
which possibly.
I mean, our plan is for the wind farm to own the cable over the entire route. It's our obligation to deliver power to that substation. We need the ability to control our ability to connect into that substation.
The statement you just made, I find ironic that they'd be more concerned about the damage they were going to do to remove the cable than they are about installing it, but never mind. We had a meeting here back in March. I'm just wondering how we went, and I asked you specifically, I think you were standing over there, the size of the cable and whether or not it was oil-cooled. And you said it was not oil-cooled. It was going to, got that. You also said it was going to be 8.5 inch to 11 inch. What changed? Now it's 18 inch.
We're in the process of designing the cable.
So you couldn't possibly have done any testing on a cable that you've yet to design. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That'll end the presentation on the Deepwater Wind Farm South Fork for this evening. We will have a Harbor Management Committee this Thursday from 5 to 7, if anyone cares to join us to help debrief all this information. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Oh, and thank you to the Deepwater Wind team for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. At the trustee office, 5 p.m., Bluff Road.
Guys, okay, taking a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Let the room clear out. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break while the room clears out.
Going to take a 5-minute break. Stay tuned.
right.
There we are, back on tape.
Let's get back on track here.
Okay.
Rona, we're going to start up. Sorry. Thank you. Under new business, we have a letter from Chris Vada in reference to repairs at his residence located at 272 Shore Road. Excuse us, guys. Thanks. Jim, you went and looked at that?
Yes. Okay, to give the rest of the board a background on this, this started with Rick noticing something going on down there. I ran down, and basically what they've done is they've gutted the house, they've replaced the windmill, or the windows. They were in the process of re-siding. They had about a 10-yard dumpster there with no tarp on it. I notified the town. The town has, I believe, intervened. Code enforcement was going by there, but I did call Mr. Vader and asked him to please cease and desist. He sent us a letter essentially saying that until he has his permits in place.
Okay.
What I do think we should very much have is, you know, when you do read the rules and regulations on, for Lazy Point, the only thing Mr. Vetter was in violation of from this board was having a dumpster in his yard. Okay? I think we do need some sort of language basically articulating that that anything you're doing, you have to have full, all your permits in place for, and there's no language in those rules and regulations that say anything along those lines.
And a copy should be provided to the trustees.
Well, I mean, basically it says if you're doing anything that requires a building permit, then you're going to also need a trustee permit.
I don't know that there's any language in there for that, Diane. Read it, please.
Unless it got switched out 2 years ago.
Diane,
All right.
it's, I got to tell you, I think it's one of the weakest things going, because I've heard from you and from other people that, you know, okay, you know, you've got to look at the rules and regulations, but when you look at that document, there's a lot of holes in it.
Well, let me ask you this. Do we really have a concern about what goes on the interior of the house? I mean, if the footprint's not all.
Well, Francis, no, we don't. Only in the extent that if you got somebody guts a house, okay, if this is anything, if you got a house, in fact, actually, the way the code reads, if you replace a window in your house, you're required to get a building permit for it. Used to be years ago, the building permit, the building department, I think the threshold was 2 or 3 windows. It was really vague. Nowadays, it's 1 window, because basically what they want you to do is they want you to get an insulation inspection. Okay, if you're taking the walls out of the house, clearly you're going to be doing electrical work. You're going to need an underwriter certificate on that. So I just think we need some language in our rules and regs that clearly directs the tenants to the town to get the proper permits for whatever's
basic
going
guideline.
on down there, yeah.
It's a good committee project for the...
You know, I don't think it's a whole lot of language, but, you know, I think it would eliminate
I
some
look
of the...
forward to seeing the Lazy Point residents here when you all start to discuss that next year.
Well, listen, you know what happened is it was just...
Been there, done that, Jim, have at it. Go for it. I look forward to it.
Well, I don't think it needs to be an onerous deal.
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
Nothing else in the past was onerous either, but some
Well, I
people
think
thought it was.
when you talk about raising the rents,
We didn't.
12,000%,
It was like a
you know,
misunderstanding,
that's-
so, anyway. I agree with you, so,
Hey, listen, I'm
fun.
forewarned.
yep.
All right. Application of Heidi Ho interior renovations. I mean, here's...
Actually, Heidi Ho, if you, has anybody had an opportunity to look at the plans for?
I make a motion, you're not allowed to submit anything that says Heidi Ho.
Hey, listen, I thought the first emails about Heidi Ho were somebody's idea of a joke, okay? And I feel a little foolish now, because no, it's real. But anyway,
Oh,
Is
well,
it?
I'm sure.
Are you here for Mrs. Ho?
All right.
Okay.
Heidi-ho.
Well, I mean, it's not just interior. We're doing new siding, we're doing new windows, and I think they're going through the whole process beyond us for their permits. Hi.
And they should be submitting
Sean
an
Webb from Form
application.
Architectures.
Okay.
So I'm representing Heidi Ho and her husband Dmitry Potishko. They just bought this place this fall. And they would like to do interior renovations and replace the siding, windows, and the roofing material. Basically, nothing's been done in that cottage for about 50 years. I actually brought some photographs. You guys need to see it.
If you've got the photographs, that would be probably
Not of the exterior. They did, the previous owners did replace the septic system, I think, in 2013. We're not proposing any extensions. We are reducing 3 to 2, and we're rearranging some of the interior
the
rooms. Footprint stays exactly where it is.
Who was the previous leasee?
Do you know who the previous owner
I
was?
can't remember their name. It was an old couple from Queens.
George Elby's place. Demonstrated a couple houses.
Oh, yeah.
They were there forever.
I recognize this.
Yep.
So the footprint of the dwelling is not changing?
No, not at all.
The height?
No height issues.
Where's the front?
The front's where you see the, kind of the gate, the fence.
This is kind of it.
Oh, I see.
And then the ocean side is the other gable.
Okay, thank you.
nice.
Bayside.
Yeah.
So I mean, we assume we would go and get a full building permit and all that, so that's,
Is this your first stop?
yes.
Okay. Because you realize anything we do is going to be pending you getting the other any of your other permits.
Right, so we are hoping we can just get a building permit, but understand that they might put it back into NRSP or whatever. I hope not.
What's going to happen with the siding?
We want to do cedar, wood cedar siding.
Yeah. They've got elevations here.
So do you have an application with the building department at this time?
No, we were told to come here first, and then go from there.
Part of your,
Since it's new business, I might just recommend that the committee have an opportunity to take this information and review it and come back at your next meeting and discuss it. Because there's bound to be something in these plans you're trying to look through right here that somebody's going to miss. Somebody might come up with a question in 2 weeks.
Are you pressed for time?
They'd obviously like to be in, get it done, 4 or 5 months. So does the board continue now, or is it a new board as of next?
there's some new members come January.
Jim, what do you want to do?
I think Diane's suggestion is a good one. I just looked at this today. But I recognize that, it's compliant with, it's pretty much compliant with everything we've approved. Certainly the house is going to take on a different look than it does right now. I don't think it's as bad, it looks like it's a vast improvement.
Looks more traditional to me than,
What's that?
to me, it looks more traditional than what's there now.
Well,
What is it now, with aluminum siding?
That or
it's a
clapboard?
little more happening what you got going on with siding and the window schedule and stuff. It's,
Probably going to have to, with the rules and regs, give them permission to put a dumpster in the yard.
Yeah.
And I know there's a size limit on that.
Now, Diane, because you were part of that, why is there a size limit on the dumpster?
Because the driveways were so small and they were being placed in the roadway, which then became a navigational hazard,
Fire department.
fire department.
Yeah, I remember that.
But on some of these
Yeah.
properties where you do have a pretty defined driveway, and I'm gonna speak to that Vetter property.
Then
They
you
were-
should, you should.
They were
just-
able to fit a 10-yard dumpster in there, which was far in excess of what we're allowing. They were able to fit a 10-yard dumpster in
So
there.
then when you describe your approval of, it's an exception to the rules and
Yeah.
regs to allow a
You know,
larger
we had the one
dumpster.
down the road, Cohen, also did not get a permit for a dumpster that had had an 8-yarder at their place.
Yep.
And again, they were able to fit that on the property and accommodate it pretty easily.
Real
What is the
estate, real
size of
estate
your
signs should not be placed down there.
What's the size limit that we have now?
I can't remember off the top of my
Pretty
head, I'm
small.
sorry.
Is it
10?
5?
And I
Five,
think
10?
somebody
Forget.
mentioned this, and I'll repeat
Yeah.
it. It's imperative during the construction phase that it always be covered.
Right.
Because it gets really windy down there, and obviously...
Well, that's not a matter of it being windy, that's the East
Town
Hampton
code.
Town Code.
Well, yeah, but how often have you seen that not the case, though? That's what I'm saying.
They write a lot of tickets for that.
Okay.
Less.
Yeah.
I think that's what, I'd like to recommend, that we sit on this for a month. Anybody generates any questions about it.
Okay, so what, the
I
next
have-
meeting is the 11th, is the January?
January
Well,
8th.
we have an organizational meeting on the 8th, and we won't address it then. It would be the following meeting.
Which
But
is what it is.
in the interim, I don't think,
Yeah, in the interim.
there's no harm in him pursuing his building permit.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, for
He should-
Yeah.
He should go ahead and start that process, yeah.
It would be
So the basic, you feel like the basic thing is, okay, it's just a matter of...
I'm going to be honest,
January
I've looked
22nd.
at it, personally, I don't have any problems with it.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
It's going to be the same size, same place.
No, it's
Better stuff.
you know, the only thing, on your site plan, this doesn't say, is this existing?
Yes.
But it doesn't,
What is that, Jim?
it doesn't say that. Usually, you know, on stuff like this, you're doing renovations, there's like the existing
I
proposed.
think we have it on the, we have the demo
Yeah.
plan, which shows,
You have the demo plan, it's at a different scale, it's not dimensioned.
okay, we can add that in. You want me to send it over to the...
Yeah, you know
And
what?
there's probably going to be a survey required for the building permit, so it should show on that as well as existing.
No problem.
Do we have a survey?
Well, there's no survey attached to this. There's
I have a
site-
survey.
Doris has-
You do.
Is this survey?
Didn't hear that.
Are you upgrading the septic system?
It was apparently upgraded in 2013. I can get the
Okay.
details on it if you need
We
it.
have a survey here, Jim.
Wouldn't hurt. The
I
more
didn't ha- I
complete,
didn't have a
more the better.
survey.
Okay, all right.
We can
I'll
work
get
that
the, I don't have the paper form, but it was apparently done before. I'll get that information.
Jim, is the present septic system closer to the road?
I don't think it's on the survey.
Oh,
Its present septic system isn't even shown.
all right.
Maybe we should get an
Yeah,
understanding.
that should be.
Oh, I believe it was done legally, so I'll get it from the
Okay,
county
you
or
know
whatever.
what?
Yeah.
Why don't we just have it on,
10/13/17.
we can have that on the survey?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just because you're going to need it at the end anyway.
Revised November 2nd.
What was the revision for, does it say?
Yep.
Yeah, closer to the road's better.
I'm sure it was put in that area, that raised area behind the house.
But that's all the details that
What it was.
take time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
So I should attend the following meeting on...
Not the 9th, not the 8th,
22nd.
22nd.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
I think it's thought the other process is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you can
should,
get
you
the-
should pursue the other permits.
Yeah.
All right. We have a letter from Camille Peritet
Check it out.
of Pier. I'll read it to you, and then what I'll do is we'll leave this at the office, and if anybody chooses to sign it, they're more than welcome to. Pier is a member of New York Renews, an unprecedented statewide coalition of 120-plus organizations fighting for climate policies grounded in equity and justice for communities and working people. We are writing to you today to express our profound concern about the impacts of climate change on Long Island communities. From coastal erosion to ocean acidification to aquifer saltwater intrusion, our communities face an uncertain future without bold action to mitigate and adapt to the threat of climate change. With regression at the federal level, real climate action can and must come from states like New York. A growing chorus of New Yorkers is calling for the state to protect our families' health, create local jobs, and invest in clean energy solutions by making corporate polluters pay for the damage they're doing to our air and our climate. Attached is an open letter circulating among local elected officials across the state calling for increased investment in a just transition to renewable energy by instituting a corporate polluter fee on oil, gas, and coal companies so that these entities pay for their fair share for their pollution and threatens our health, our communities, and our planet. We are writing to ask if you would be able to join colleagues from across the state in signing the letter. So I'll leave the letter in the office, and each of you can take a look at it, and there's an attached page for you to sign if you choose. Okay?
So it would be an individual elected official that would sign it?
Yeah.
Basically the board?
Yeah, they're
right?
looking
Okay.
for not just a signature, but more information. Okay. Old business, Georgica Pond, dredging the inlet. We're still in discussion with DEC. More people are participating in that discussion. And the excavation of the bottleneck, something came up with that.
Well, what?
I think they're holding a permit for a 30-foot wide dredging there.
Originally 40.
Well, we had
Right.
40, they asked for 20.
Right.
30.
And they've agreed to 30.
Drew Bennett gave data back saying that the 20-foot was going to be inadequate. He had math to support it. So they were hoping they had kicked back with a 30-foot proposal. Did we hear back from them?
Yeah, we just heard back from them. They've approved that, but they're holding it while they investigate possible violations. We have no idea what they are, so.
Violations by
We don't know.
private property owners,
We don't
by the
know.
Village of East Hampton, by the trustees,
We don't know.
by Bruce Horwitz?
Bruce has no idea what they're talking about. So there's a permit, but there's not a permit. And it's for the 30-foot wide
Hopefully we
opening.
get that started soon.
Committee reports, Accabonac Creek, dredging at Accabonac Harbor Inlet.
The Louse Point side is done. They're working on the Gerard Drive side right now. This team started moving sand this morning. So, moving.
Now, over on the Gerard Drive side, Francis, when you were sick last week, I went down there and met with Kim Shaw and Scott from the county. They have permits only to spread that sand 500 feet to, I guess it's the west of Gerard Drive, which is unfortunate because that isn't really where we could need sand. But they actually moved it quite a bit farther down. But you know what? What's sad is if we had known that this dredging was going to occur, if there was ways that we could sort of engage some of the property owners along there, give them the opportunities to submit for permits for the sand so that we could actually deposit this sand where it's really needed, as opposed to just further reinforcing the beach that's already plenty wide.
Yeah, and I think we can do a better job trying to communicate with the county and their
Yeah, I mean,
schedule.
I would love to have seen them be able to take it farther down the road, but the problem was, we don't have any there's no permits in place for any of that.
But why don't we just turn that around and say the county could have done a better job communicating with this board before they started? Yeah.
That would have been helpful.
It would have been.
We can make the homeowners that could benefit from this.
Well, the thing is, I
aware of it,
think
yeah.
if we're a little like what we've done on the other side with Mullins and with Clemente and that, I think we could be a little more proactive with some of the property owners there.
I was out last year. I think we should, maybe we could write a letter or something to some of those homes. There's a couple affected homeowners all the way down at the end.
Yeah.
And there is an opportunity every once in a while for sand coming out of the culvert.
Well,
That if they
that was
had
the
a-
other thing I was going to bring up.
If they had,
The culvert is not totally blocked, but nearly so.
Pretty blocked.
pretty much totally blocked.
Well, it was flowing a little bit the other day.
Yeah.
But
No, it's
we
in a
should
bad spot
perhaps,
for sure, but
perhaps it would be a wise move on the part of the person with the house near to it to have a permit, or to try to apply
The
for
one that's on the
permits.
pilot, that's
Yeah.
kind of in the water on the pilings.
Well, the
well,
cesspool is what I'm concerned about. Cesspools.
Other than Scott?
You know, because we always wind up, we have sand and
Those three houses right there.
there's three of them in the end.
But then the ones at the end,
a little more personal relationship.
they'll actually, I think we may hear from them complaining there's too much sand down
People
there.
have, no, actually, somebody called up today and wanted to know why they were, putting sand on the beach where it wasn't necessary.
I'm
I
sure,
referred
I
them to
figured we were going to get
referred
the
them to
call.
the county. It's a good question, I mean, but it's, the channel's being emptied.
All right, harbor management?
Well, as mentioned earlier, we will be having our next meeting this Thursday at 5 PM at the trustee office on Bluff Road. We will be debriefing tonight's Deepwater Wind presentation and starting to formulate some recommendations to the trustee board.
Okay, Napeag Lazy Point, we did Curtis Geocubes, Sirota, I think was lumped into that.
No, we didn't, unfortunately, we did not lump Sirota into that, so.
But it's the same situation.
It's the same situation, so if we're sending letters of non-jurisdiction, we should probably preemptively
Didn't
forward one.
Sirota already get one?
He got one.
He has one already.
Current?
No, it's
it
not
was-
current, but
I mean, a letter of
Nobody's-
non-jurisdiction probably wouldn't change. I mean, it was.
we can do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
I don't know
Fine.
whether that's.
Did you get the titles, or some information from Rick on these properties?
We have the titles on Curtis,
Curtis.
and we have
the conveyances we have.
and we have the conveyances from the trustees, and the conveyances from the Edwardses to some other members of the Edwards family.
Okay.
And we did Devon Yacht Club. All right. 3 Mile Harbor Marina has started their dredging. We've received notification of that. Anybody have anything they want to add to it? No? All right, report of the clerk. We're going to have the organizational meeting January 8th here at Town Hall, 6:30 PM. We'll end that there. Administrative. Payment of the bills. GEI Consultants, $580.80 for Georgica Pond Survey. I believe that's in connected to the meeting we went to at the DEC. Anthony Tohill for Seaview, $1,286.25. East Hampton Marina, $170.69 for repair of the holding tank. And Optimum, $165.72. Can I have a motion to pay the
I'd like
bills?
to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm in favor of all but the GEI survey.
Okay.
Would you like to see a copy of that?
No. Thank you.
One thing regarding the pump-out boats stored behind the trustee office, one of the members of the Ocean Rescue Squad mentioned we want to take a look at how they're buttoned up for the winter, that they might be leaking.
One of them has to get a repair to a fuel tank.
Okay.
It's going to be, we talked to Briggs, it's going to be going down there after the first of the year.
Okay, it's just with the cold weather, there was some water pooling in the boat, so we just want to make sure we take a look down there.
All right. Minutes, September 11th, 2017.
Yeah, I had a chance to briefly look them over with Diane's corrections, and I don't think there's anything really substantial there other than some corrections and edits, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of September 11th with Diane's corrections.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, September 25th?
Once again, you know, the minutes seem to be in good standing, a few corrections, and I think they're in good shape, and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion or second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, October 23rd.
23rd, once again, the minutes look in good standing with corrections. I'd like to make a motion to get the minutes approved with amendments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
November 13th.
I have not looked at the 13th, but I'm open to someone else who may
I'll make a
have.
motion to approve the minutes of November 13, 2007, because they're just like the other three. There's just some simple clerical changes, you know, i.e. like, what's the word? Disembolishment was changed to demolish.
Yeah, and I think based on,
Wasn't it demolishment?
Demolishment.
Yeah, prepare for
So-
demolishment.
you know, I think based
Yeah,
on the,
yeah.
Simple changes.
based on the other minutes, I'd like
And
to,
I saw the corrections she made,
yeah, I'd
and I
like to
agree.
make a motion to approve the 13th of November with the amendments.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Financial report for the month ended November 20th.
I had an opportunity
30th.
to look at it pretty thoroughly, and everything appears to be in order. I could make a motion at this time that we accept, but I want to give everybody an opportunity if they have any questions. If not, then I would make a motion that we accept the balance sheet as of November 30th, 2017.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, correspondence. Copy of a letter to Southampton Town Trustees from I can't pronounce this name, I'm sorry. B. Del Giudice? RE Shellfish Aquaculture Lease Program.
Did you send that letter to the other members, or?
Did I? I haven't even seen it. This is the first I'm
okay.
seeing it,
Oh, all right.
to be honest with you. All right, this is about the county's program. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to just take a look at it? at the office?
Curious. Does the county have any lease sites out here?
The
Well,
ones off Devon are starting.
yeah,
to-
they're doing Devon
Oh, yeah?
area.
Yeah.
And Long Island Shellfish Managers Meeting is set for 12/12/17.
It's in the daytime, right?
It's in the daytime. I don't see a location.
That's probably at the DEC, Stony Brook.
Okay. Anybody who'd like to go? Have fun.
I can't.
Anything on that? No? No? Okay. Anybody else have anything? Brian?
Just one thing. I think it's only fitting that at this time we thank Diane for her many, many years of service.
This is
You know,
nothing in our
you've have provided us with a lot of institutional knowledge. I know personally I've asked you many times, for help, and you've always been there. So I have to say that I've enjoyed 99% of the time working with you. But thank you so much.
Thank you,
And I
Brian.
know the board
Thank you,
feels as
Diane.
well.
Well, maybe I'll just end by saying, if you think I was tough here, wait till I'm over there.
On that note,
Okay.
motion to
No, it's
adjourn?
easy.
Yes, happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I brought everybody some money.
Thank you.
I wonder where that Grimes honey went.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.